For several minutes, the whale does almost nothing. Its dark back rests just beneath the surface, rising and falling with the slow movement of the sea. Each breath arrives with a force that can be heard across the water, a sharp eruption of warm air and vapor thrown forward and to the left rather than straight upward. From a distance, that angled blow may be the first sign that this is no ordinary whale. Closer in, the strangeness becomes impossible to ignore. The head seems far too large for the body behind it, a vast, blunt structure pushing through the ocean like the bow of a ship. There is no graceful arching forehead, no long beak, no symmetry of the kind humans instinctively associate with a well-designed animal. The skin is dark and deeply wrinkled. The lower jaw looks almost too narrow to belong beneath such an enormous head. The small eye sits far back along the side, as though it were added after everything else had already been built. Even the blowhole is misplaced, twisted toward the left-hand corner of the skull. If an artist unfamiliar with whales had tried to invent a deep-sea giant, the result might have looked more balanced than the real animal. Then the whale breathes again. It has already spent much of the previous hour beneath the surface, but it cannot immediately return. Oxygen must be restored. Carbon dioxide must be expelled. The muscles and blood that carried the animal through the last dive must prepare for the next one. A sequence of blows follows, separated by brief silences. Nothing about the scene suggests urgency. The whale has repeated this cycle thousands of times: descent, hunt, ascent, recovery. To anyone watching from a boat, the surface appears to be the center of the encounter. This is where the whale becomes visible, where photographs are taken, where its length can be estimated and its scars compared with old records. Yet from the whale's perspective, these minutes may be little more than an interval. The surface is where it comes to breathe. Its working life begins when it leaves. At last, the rhythm changes. The head dips. More of the long back rolls into view, revealing a low series of humps rather than the prominent dorsal fin carried by many other cetaceans. The whale bends downward, and for a moment the ocean seems to cling to its body. Then the tail rises. Water runs from the trailing edges of the flukes in silver sheets. The entire animal hangs almost vertically beneath them, tens of tons balanced below a shape that remains visible for only a few seconds. Researchers may photograph the pattern of notches and scars along that tail because, like a fingerprint, it can reveal which individual has returned. Then the flukes slide beneath the surface, the water closes, and the whale is gone. There is no dramatic splash. No trail marks the direction it takes. The sea that contained one of the largest predators on Earth looks empty again. But the whale has not vanished in the ordinary sense. It has crossed a boundary humans rarely follow. It is descending toward the part of its life from which almost all direct observation disappears. This is the contradiction that has shaped almost everything we know about sperm whales. They inhabit oceans across much of the planet. Their blows have been seen in tropical waters, near remote islands, over deep continental slopes, and in cold seas where enormous males travel to feed. They are not tiny, elusive animals capable of hiding inside coral or disappearing beneath stones. Mature males can reach lengths comparable to a large bus and weigh many tens of tons. The head alone can account for roughly a third of the body. The sperm whale possesses the largest brain known in any living animal and is among the largest toothed predators ever to exist. Yet size has not made its private world easy to enter. Most of what matters happens below the limit of sunlight, below the depth at which divers can safely follow, and often far beneath the reach of ordinary cameras. A blue whale feeds by moving through concentrations of krill that may sometimes be observed near the surface. Humpbacks cooperate around fish, breach into the air and gather in coastal waters where their behavior can be filmed. Sperm whales repeatedly descend for prey that humans may never see, in darkness where a surface vessel can record only a position, a sound, and the eventual return of the animal that produced them. For most of history, people did not study the living whale in the deep. They waited for it to come back, or they killed it and tried to reconstruct its life from what remained. That history left behind a distorted portrait. Sailors knew the sperm whale through the glimpse of a blow on the horizon, the violent pull of a harpoon line, and the immense body secured beside a wooden ship. Naturalists received skulls, teeth, pieces of skin, preserved organs and written descriptions from men whose purpose had never been patient observation. The living animal was transformed into separate materials before science had much opportunity to understand the whole. Its oil illuminated homes and lubricated machinery. The waxy substance filling much of its head became one of the most valuable products in the whaling economy. The lower jaw was opened, the stomach inspected, and the contents examined for squid beaks that digestion had failed to destroy. Scars on the skin inspired stories of battles with creatures from the abyss. The whale's anatomy appeared bizarre because it was being studied on decks and beaches, removed from the acoustic darkness that had shaped it. A structure built to function in deep water can look almost absurd when laid motionless beneath the sun. Even the name carries the misunderstanding. Early whalers believed the pale, oily material inside the head resembled reproductive fluid. They called it spermaceti, and the animal became the sperm whale. One of the most sophisticated sensory structures in the ocean was named through a mistake. The skull beneath that head deepens the mystery. It is dramatically asymmetrical. The bones and nasal passages do not mirror one another in the way a human face does. The blowhole opens near the front left side because the respiratory passage has been displaced and reshaped across millions of years of evolution. In a world where symmetry often seems synonymous with efficiency, the sperm whale looks as though its anatomy has been twisted. But biological structures are not designed to satisfy the human eye. They are altered by whatever improves survival. Inside the whale's forehead lies a complex arrangement of air sacs, dense connective tissues, and enormous reservoirs of oil-rich material. Sound generated within the nasal system can interact with these structures before being projected into the water as powerful, highly directional clicks. The same head that appears overgrown and clumsy at the surface becomes something entirely different at depth, an acoustic machine operating in darkness. Its shape is not a decorative feature or an evolutionary accident. It is part of the reason the whale can enter an environment in which vision loses much of its value and still locate moving prey across open water. Early observers saw a container of commercially valuable oil. Modern researchers hear the head working. Hearing it, however, is much easier than seeing what it does. Long before digital tags existed, researchers followed sperm whales by listening. A hydrophone lowered from a vessel could detect repetitive clicks traveling through the sea. Those sounds revealed the presence of animals hidden below the waves and allowed scientists to estimate direction, movement, and sometimes distance. Modern acoustic arrays can listen across far larger areas, detecting whales that no person aboard the ship ever sees. Photo identification adds another layer. When a whale raises its tail before a dive, researchers photograph the unique pattern of damage along the flukes. Years later, the same individual may be recognized hundreds or thousands of kilometers away. Small samples of sloughed skin or carefully collected tissue can reveal sex, relatedness, population structure, and aspects of diet through genetic and chemical analysis. Satellite tags may follow broad movements. Temporary suction cup tags can record depth, body orientation, acceleration, and sound, turning the whale's back into a moving research platform for several hours. Some record the animal's own clicks alongside the faint echoes returning from its surroundings. Each method opens a narrow window, but none provides the complete view that a camera crew might capture beside a lion on open grassland. Researchers often know that a whale has begun searching because its click pattern changes. They can detect a rapid sequence associated with closing on prey. They may record rolls, turns, and bursts of movement suggesting pursuit. Then the whale eventually surfaces, perhaps carrying no visible sign of whether the hunt succeeded. The most important event occurred in darkness and left behind data rather than images. Suction cup acoustic and movement tags now reveal dive depth, movement, and sound production, but even these devices accompany a whale for only a fraction of its life. This limitation makes the sperm whale unusually vulnerable to exaggeration. Where direct observation is missing, imagination rushes in. Its clicks have been described as biological weapons capable of paralyzing prey, even though the evidence for routine acoustic stunning remains uncertain. Every circular scar becomes proof of a titanic struggle with a giant squid. Every solitary male becomes a wandering monster of the deep. The truth is no less extraordinary, but it is more complicated. Sperm whales do consume large cephalopods, yet their diets include many kinds of squid and deep-water fish, varying across oceans and individuals. Some scars may come from prey, others from encounters with members of their own species, fishing gear, or injuries accumulated over decades. Their enormous head produces some of the most powerful biological sounds known. But loudness alone does not explain the extraordinary control required to use returning echoes while chasing small, mobile targets. Science has not made the animal less mysterious. It has replaced one simple myth with dozens of deeper questions. Even the phrase "largest tooth predator" can create the wrong image. Teeth invite thoughts of jaws closing around prey, but most of the sperm whale's large conical teeth are concentrated in the narrow lower jaw. The upper jaw often contains only sockets into which those teeth fit when the mouth closes. The arrangement looks unimpressive beside the triangular blades of a great white shark or the interlocking teeth of an orca. Yet a predator is not defined by how frightening its mouth appears in a photograph. The sperm whale's real advantage lies in reaching prey that most large hunters cannot access, detecting it where eyes are nearly useless, and returning repeatedly from depths that place immense demands on every air-filled space inside the body. Its feeding strategy begins long before the mouth opens. The descent itself is part of the hunt. The whale photographed at the surface may now be hundreds of meters below the boat. No human observer can see the change taking place around it. Red light has already disappeared. Yellow follows, then green. The bright upper ocean narrows into a dim blue ceiling, and finally into darkness. Temperature falls as the whale passes through layers of water that may differ sharply from those above. The noises of waves and weather become distant. The animal continues downward, using gravity and the weight of its body to reduce unnecessary effort. Somewhere beneath it are squid and fish, scattered through a three-dimensional wilderness without paths, landmarks, or sunlight. Above, the research vessel waits inside the familiar world of air. Its crew may follow a signal on a screen or listen to clicks through headphones, but the whale itself has entered a place where human intuition begins to fail. For an air-breathing mammal, the decision to descend is filled with apparent contradictions. The animal must carry oxygen, but cannot continue breathing. Its body contains lungs and other spaces exposed to pressure that increases with every meter. It must keep the brain alive, power muscles, control temperature, and remain capable of reversing direction after an extended hunt. A human taken to the same depth without protection would not simply become uncomfortable. The pressure would compress air-filled spaces, disrupt normal physiology, and make survival impossible. Yet, the sperm whale follows this route not once in an emergency, but again and again throughout its life. The strange head that baffled early naturalists is only the most visible part of an animal reorganized around this descent. Beneath the skin, blood, muscle, ribs, lungs, and heartbeat are beginning to respond. The sunlight is fading above it, the water is growing colder, and before the whale can find anything hidden in the darkness, its body must first survive being carried into a world that seems designed to crush it. The whale is no longer visible from the surface. Above, the ocean has already erased every trace of its departure, smoothing itself into a sheet of shifting blue that gives no hint of the giant descending beneath it. If you were standing on the deck of the research vessel, you would see nothing but open water. The silence would almost convince you that the animal had left. Yet directly below, one of the most extraordinary physiological transformations in the natural world has already begun. Every second carries the whale farther from sunlight, farther from breathable air, and deeper into a place where the rules governing life on land no longer apply. It does not hesitate. There is no moment of uncertainty before committing to the descent. This journey has been repeated thousands of times throughout its life, so often that the sequence has become as natural as walking is to a human. But what feels routine to the whale is astonishing when viewed through the limits of our own biology. Every meter downward increases the pressure pressing against its body. Every meter widens the distance between the whale and the single thing every mammal ultimately depends upon: the atmosphere above the sea. Within only a few minutes, the animal will enter conditions that would rapidly overwhelm an unprotected human diver. Yet the sperm whale continues downward with remarkable calm. as though it were moving through an environment perfectly suited to its existence. That impression is not an illusion. It is the result of millions of years of evolution, gradually reshaping an ordinary air-breathing mammal into one of the most specialized divers that has ever lived. Imagine filling your lungs with one deep breath and stepping into an elevator that never stops descending. At first, nothing feels unusual. The light still reaches you. Your chest rises and falls with the memory of that final breath. But then the pressure begins to build. Human lungs evolved to function beneath a relatively stable atmosphere. They depend on delicate air sacs where oxygen passes into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide leaves it. Those microscopic structures are remarkably efficient at sea level, but they are not designed for the crushing force found hundreds of meters beneath the ocean. Under extreme pressure, gases compress dramatically. Air-filled spaces become dangerous. Every additional meter increases the strain. For a human diver, this creates one of the greatest challenges of deep diving. Breathing compressed gas at depth changes the behavior of nitrogen inside the body. During ascent, dissolved gases can form bubbles in tissues and blood vessels if pressure decreases too quickly, producing decompression sickness, commonly known as the bends. Even highly trained technical divers must carefully control their descent, ascent, and breathing mixtures to reduce these risks. The sperm whale solves the same problem in an entirely different way. Instead of fighting the pressure, its body has evolved to work with it. Long before the deepest part of the dive is reached, the lungs begin doing something that would sound alarming if described in isolation. They collapse. In humans, a collapsed lung is a medical emergency. In a sperm whale, controlled collapse is part of normal life. As pressure increases, the flexible chest compresses, and much of the air is forced away from the tiny exchange surfaces deep within the lungs. Those delicate alveoli gradually stop participating in gas exchange at extreme depth, limiting additional nitrogen absorption precisely when pressure is greatest. The remaining air shifts into stronger upper airways better able to tolerate compression. Rather than resisting physics, the whale allows physics to reshape its body during the dive. Its ribs are not rigid barriers trying to preserve the same chest volume regardless of depth. They possess a flexibility that permits controlled compression without catastrophic injury. The entire respiratory system behaves less like a fragile balloon and more like an adaptive structure designed to change form as the environment changes around it. This remarkable solution did not appear overnight. The ancestors of whales once walked on land. Tens of millions of years ago, they breathed air, supported their weight on 4 limbs, and lived lives that would have looked surprisingly familiar compared with modern mammals. As successive generations spent more time in the water, their skeletons, muscles, circulation, and lungs were gradually reshaped by natural selection. The sperm whale represents one of the most extreme outcomes of that transition. Every deep dive carries the history of those evolutionary changes within it. Yet collapsing the lungs creates another challenge. If the lungs no longer supply oxygen efficiently at great depth, where does the whale obtain the oxygen needed to power a body weighing dozens of tons? The answer lies in a strategy almost opposite to our own. Humans think of the lungs as the primary oxygen reservoir, because our activities rarely require us to remain without breathing for very long. In the sperm whale, the lungs serve mainly to replenish supplies before the dive begins. Once submerged, much of the usable oxygen has already been transferred elsewhere. Its bloodstream carries enormous quantities of oxygen, bound to hemoglobin inside red blood cells, and its muscles contain exceptionally high concentrations of myoglobin, a specialized oxygen-binding protein that gives diving muscles their unusually dark color. Myoglobin acts as an internal reserve, storing oxygen directly where it will be needed during prolonged swimming. If human muscle resembles a traveler carrying only enough supplies for a short walk, sperm whale muscle resembles an explorer leaving with provisions for an expedition. This difference becomes obvious under the microscope. Marine mammals capable of extreme diving consistently possess far greater concentrations of myoglobin than land mammals, allowing them to continue producing energy even when fresh oxygen from the lungs is unavailable. The sperm whale pushes this adaptation to extraordinary levels. Even its blood volume exceeds what would be expected for an animal of similar size living on land. Every liter contributes to extending the time available beneath the surface. Oxygen, however, is only part of the story. Using it wisely matters just as much as carrying it. Almost as soon as the whale begins descending, another coordinated response unfolds throughout the body. The heartbeat slows. This phenomenon, known as bradycardia, occurs in many diving mammals, but in sperm whales it becomes one component of a sophisticated physiological strategy, often called the diving response. A slower heart conserves energy and reduces the rate at which oxygen reserves are consumed. At the same time, blood vessels supplying less immediately essential tissues constrict, reducing circulation to areas that can temporarily tolerate lower oxygen delivery. The brain continues receiving what it needs. The heart itself remains supplied. Critical organs are prioritized while muscles and peripheral tissues rely increasingly on their own stored oxygen reserves. It is an elegant redistribution rather than a complete shutdown. The whale does not simply slow down, it reorganizes its internal economy. Every molecule of oxygen becomes more valuable the deeper the dive continues. Modern tags attached with temporary suction cups have revealed just how dynamic these dives can be. Far from descending in a simple straight line, sperm whales often adjust their orientation repeatedly while searching through the water column. Accelerometers record subtle body movements. Pressure sensors reconstruct depth second by second. Hydrophones mounted on the same devices capture the animal's own clicks echoing through the darkness. Together, these instruments allow researchers to reconstruct journeys no camera has ever followed continuously. A whale may descend steadily for many minutes before leveling into a prolonged foraging phase marked by repeated changes in direction as prey is located and pursued. Only after the hunt is complete does the ascent begin. These records have transformed scientific understanding, replacing speculation with detailed behavioral data, while simultaneously revealing how much remains hidden. Every recovered tag answers one question and creates several more. One of the most remarkable discoveries is how predictable many dives become for individual whales. Healthy adults often repeat similar patterns over and over, alternating long, deep foraging dives with shorter recovery periods near the surface. The precise depths vary depending on prey, location, and the individual itself, but the rhythm remains surprisingly consistent. This regularity reminds researchers that extraordinary behavior is not necessarily exceptional. Newspaper headlines often celebrate the deepest dive ever recorded or the longest breath hold ever measured, but those records represent the extreme edge of a much broader biological reality. A sperm whale does not need to break world records every day to survive. Most hunts occur within ranges that maximize success, while balancing the enormous energetic cost of travel. Chasing deeper than necessary would waste precious oxygen. Remaining too shallow could mean missing the concentrations of prey that make each descent worthwhile. Natural selection favors efficiency far more often than spectacle. Cold presents another challenge that receives far less attention than pressure, yet it shapes every moment of the dive. Temperature drops significantly as the whale leaves the sunlit surface layers behind. Water conducts heat away from the body far more efficiently than air, creating a constant risk of energy loss. The sperm whale counters this with thick insulating blubber surrounding much of the body, reducing heat transfer while also serving as an energy reserve. Beneath that insulation, circulation can be adjusted to minimize unnecessary heat loss from peripheral tissues during prolonged dives. The result is not perfect isolation, but careful management. Maintaining body temperature in the deep ocean is not a passive process. It requires constant physiological regulation, balancing heat conservation against the needs of active muscles engaged in swimming and hunting. Every descent, therefore, becomes an intricate calculation performed automatically by the body itself. Oxygen must be conserved but still delivered where needed. Pressure must be accommodated without damaging delicate tissues. Heat must be retained despite the surrounding cold. Energy expenditure must remain lower than the nutritional reward waiting somewhere below. None of these systems operates independently. They are interconnected parts of a single biological design, refined over evolutionary time. Remove one adaptation and the entire strategy begins to fail. Flexible ribs without oxygen-rich muscles would accomplish little. Large oxygen stores without circulatory control would be exhausted too quickly. Efficient lungs without specialized blood chemistry would limit the duration of every dive. The sperm whale succeeds because all of these adaptations function together, each solving a different piece of the same impossible problem. Eventually, the descent slows. The surface now lies far above, invisible beyond layers of dark water pressing against every side of the whale's body. Its heartbeat remains controlled. Its lungs have changed shape. Oxygen stored in blood and muscle continues fueling movement with extraordinary efficiency. Everything about the animal has been reorganized for survival, in a place where mammals should not easily exist. Yet surviving the journey was never the purpose of the dive. It was only the price of admission. Somewhere ahead, hidden within complete darkness, something valuable enough to justify all of this extraordinary biology is already moving through the water, waiting to be found. The last trace of sunlight disappears somewhere far above, not all at once, but so gradually that no clear boundary exists between day and night. Blue fades into charcoal, charcoal into black, until the ocean becomes a place where the human eye no longer provides reliable information. There are no shadows because there is almost no light left to cast them. There is no visible horizon separating sea from sky, no seabed stretching beneath the whale, no distant landmark to navigate toward. Every direction appears equally empty. If a human diver somehow reached this depth without the crushing pressure already making survival impossible, one instinct would quickly take over above all others: the need to look around. Our brains have evolved to trust vision more than any other sense. We constantly build maps of the world from reflected light, judging distance, movement, and danger in fractions of a second. In the deep ocean, that strategy begins to fail. Looking harder does not reveal more. The darkness simply looks back. Yet for the sperm whale, this is the moment when the world becomes clearer than ever. The disappearance of sunlight is not the beginning of blindness. It is the beginning of perception. Long before the whale reaches the depths where giant squid and deep-water fish drift through perpetual darkness, another sense has already taken over completely. The animal no longer depends on light to reveal its surroundings, because it carries its own way of seeing. Every few moments, an almost unimaginably powerful click leaves its head and races into the darkness ahead. To human ears, if we could somehow hear it underwater without protection, it would not sound like the haunting songs often associated with whales. There is no melody, no rising chorus echoing through the sea. Instead, there are sharp, mechanical bursts so intense that they rank among the loudest biological sounds ever measured. They are brief, precise, and purposeful. They are not produced for beauty. They are produced because somewhere ahead, hidden inside complete darkness, there is an animal the whale intends to find. It is remarkable to think that for centuries people believed the enormous forehead of the sperm whale existed mainly because it contained valuable oil. Entire industries were built around harvesting the strange waxy substance known as spermaceti, while the true sophistication of the structure surrounding it remained almost entirely unknown. Only much later did scientists begin to understand that this enormous head is not simply a storage chamber. It is one of the most specialized acoustic systems ever produced by evolution. Inside the whale's nasal complex sits a pair of structures known as the phonic lips. Unlike humans who generate sound by forcing air across vibrating vocal cords inside the larynx, toothed whales create many of their sounds through the rapid movement of air across these specialized tissues. Each movement generates an intense pulse of sound that begins traveling through the complex architecture, filling the enormous forehead. The head itself becomes part of the instrument. Behind those phonic lips lies the gigantic spermaceti organ, surrounded by connective tissues, air sacs, and another specialized structure known simply as the junk. The name may sound almost humorous, as though early anatomists could think of nothing more scientific, yet the tissue itself is anything but ordinary. Made of compartments filled with waxy oils separated by collagen walls, it appears to help shape and direct outgoing sound before it leaves the front of the head. Researchers continue studying exactly how every part contributes to acoustic performance. But together, these structures function less like a hollow skull and more like an enormous biological lens. Light passes through glass lenses to create focused images. Sound passes through the sperm whale's forehead to create focused beams capable of reaching extraordinary distances through water. Evolution has effectively transformed the whale's head into a living sonar projector. That word, sonar, is often used casually, yet it deserves a moment of reflection because it fundamentally changes how we imagine the whale experiencing its world. Human beings illuminate darkness by carrying light. We switch on flashlights, build headlights into cars, and place floodlights around buildings. The sperm whale illuminates darkness using sound instead. Every click races outward through the ocean at roughly 1,500 meters per second, moving far faster than sound travels through air. When those sound waves encounter another object, perhaps a squid changing direction, a school of deep-water fish, or even the rough outline of an underwater canyon, part of the energy returns as an echo. That returning information reaches the whale fractions of a second later. But hearing the echo is only the beginning. The brain must interpret countless tiny differences in timing, intensity, and frequency to reconstruct what lies ahead. Distance can be estimated because farther objects take longer to return their echoes. Direction can be inferred because sound reaches different parts of the receiving system at slightly different moments. Movement changes the returning pattern. Even subtle differences in texture or internal composition may alter the quality of the reflected signal. To us, the ocean at this depth appears empty because we depend on vision. To the sperm whale, it is filled with information arriving continuously from every click it sends into the darkness. Perhaps the most elegant part of this system is how the echoes return. Although the outgoing beam leaves through the front of the head, incoming sound appears to be received primarily through the lower jaw. That narrow jaw, which seems almost too small beneath such an enormous forehead, contains specialized fatty tissues capable of conducting sound toward the ears embedded deep within the skull. Once again, an anatomical feature that initially appears awkward reveals itself as part of a highly integrated sensory system. Nothing is oversized or undersized by accident. Every unusual proportion contributes to solving the same problem, finding prey where vision cannot. Modern imaging and anatomical studies continue refining exactly how sound moves through these tissues, but the overall principle has become increasingly clear. The sperm whale does not simply hear the ocean. It actively builds an acoustic picture of it with every click. Yet even this description risks creating the wrong impression if we imagine the whale producing random bursts of sound and hoping one eventually strikes something useful. The pattern changes constantly depending on what the animal is doing. During the early search phase of a dive, the whale often produces slower, evenly spaced clicks, scanning enormous volumes of water with remarkable patience. Minutes may pass between successful encounters. Then something changes. A returning echo suggests movement. The spacing between clicks begins to shorten. The whale is no longer surveying the landscape. It has become interested in a specific target. As the distance closes, click intervals often become progressively shorter until they merge into rapid sequences known as creaks or buzzes, emitted during the final moments before an attempted capture. Scientists first recognized these patterns not by watching sperm whales hunt, but by listening to recordings attached to the whales themselves. The hunt could be heard long before it could ever be filmed. Tiny microphones mounted on suction cup tags transformed invisible behavior into acoustic evidence. Every change in rhythm hinted at a decision taking place hundreds of meters below the surface. Every burst suggested pursuit. Every silence raised new questions. Did the whale succeed? Did the squid escape? Was the target abandoned in favor of something else? Even now, some of those answers remain hidden. The technology has become astonishingly sophisticated, but the ocean remains larger than every instrument we have built to study it. The tags reveal something else equally important. Sperm whales are not relentless killing machines charging through the darkness with perfect efficiency. Many pursuits fail. Some echoes disappear unexpectedly. Prey changes direction. The whale adjusts its course repeatedly, rolling, accelerating, and turning through three-dimensional space. Hunting in the deep sea resembles neither a wolf chasing prey across open ground, nor a shark attacking from below. There is no surface to pin movement against. and no visible horizon defining direction. Up, down, left and right all remain equally available. A squid may dart vertically before suddenly reversing course. A fish school may disperse into dozens of separate targets. The whale is constantly making decisions based on information that never forms a visual picture in the human sense. Instead, it experiences an acoustic landscape updating every fraction of a second. That difference is profound because it reminds us that intelligence is always shaped by the world in which it evolves. Humans became masters of color, faces, and distant landscapes because light dominates our environment. The sperm whale became a master of echoes because darkness dominates its own. The prey itself is equally misunderstood. Popular culture has long portrayed sperm whales as creatures engaged almost exclusively in epic battles against giant squid, as though every dive were another chapter in an endless duel between two monsters. There is truth buried within that image. Giant squid do form part of the sperm whale's diet, and scars left by powerful suction cups remain visible on many adult whales throughout their lives. But reducing the species to a giant squid specialist ignores both the diversity of its prey and the complexity of the deep-sea ecosystem. Around the world, sperm whales consume a wide variety of cephalopods, ranging from relatively small squid to enormous deep-water species, alongside many kinds of fish adapted to life far below the surface. Diet changes depending on geography, ocean productivity, and the age or sex of the whale itself. Mature males feeding in colder high-latitude waters may exploit different prey communities from females raising calves in warmer regions. Individual populations adapt to the resources surrounding them. Even neighboring whales may not hunt exactly the same way. This flexibility explains much of the species' extraordinary success across the world's oceans. Rather than depending upon a single iconic prey animal, sperm whales have become specialists in exploiting an entire hidden food web stretching through the deep sea. That flexibility also explains why some long-standing myths continue to circulate. One of the most persistent claims suggests that sperm whales routinely stun or even kill prey using the sheer power of their clicks before physically capturing it. At first glance, the idea seems plausible. After all, the clicks are extraordinarily loud. Certain human technologies use intense sound to map the seafloor or detect submarines. Why should a biological sonar not also function as a weapon? Researchers have explored this possibility for decades, but the evidence remains far more cautious than popular documentaries sometimes suggest. Powerful clicks undoubtedly interact with prey in complex ways, and the exact effects of extremely intense sound at close range remain an active area of research. However, there is currently no strong evidence demonstrating that sperm whales routinely incapacitate prey through acoustic blasts before capture. The simplest explanation still fits much of what scientists observe. Echolocation is primarily an exquisitely refined sensory system rather than a biological cannon. The whale succeeds because it knows exactly where the prey is, not because it destroys it from a distance. That distinction matters because it shifts our appreciation away from raw power and toward extraordinary precision. The sperm whale's greatest weapon is not volume, it is information. Every click answers a question. Every returning echo slightly improves the whale's understanding of a world no human eye will ever see directly. And as the whale continues deeper into the darkness, those echoes begin returning more frequently, not from empty water, but from countless living bodies moving silently through one of the largest migrations on Earth. A hidden realm where fish, squid, and bioluminescent creatures rise and fall beneath the surface every single day, creating an ocean beneath the ocean that remains almost entirely invisible to us. Echo after echo returns from the darkness, and together they reveal something most people never imagine when they think about the deep ocean. It is not silent, it is not empty, it is not a vast underwater desert where only a handful of strange creatures drift through endless blackness. That image has survived for generations because the deep sea is almost impossible to observe directly. A diver cannot simply descend into these depths and spend hours watching life unfold. Cameras illuminate only tiny fragments before their lights disappear into the surrounding darkness. Even remotely operated vehicles explore an environment so immense that every expedition resembles shining a flashlight through one small window in an entire planet. The emptiness exists largely in our imagination, because human eyes rarely witness what is really happening. The sperm whale experiences something completely different. Every returning echo tells the animal that the darkness is alive. Thousands of bodies surround it. Some are no larger than a human hand. Others stretch for meters through the water. Some drift almost motionless, while others pulse, dart, and climb through the blackness with remarkable speed. None of them need sunlight to survive. This hidden ecosystem has existed for millions of years, supporting one of the greatest concentrations of animal life on Earth, while remaining almost entirely invisible from the surface. The journey into this world begins long before complete darkness. As the whale descends, sunlight weakens gradually rather than disappearing all at once. Red wavelengths vanish first, swallowed within only a few meters beneath the surface. Orange follows, then yellow, until blue becomes the final color capable of penetrating deeper water. Eventually, even that faint blue glow fades into twilight. Scientists call this region the mesopelagic zone, often referred to as the twilight zone, not because sunlight still provides enough illumination for ordinary vision, but because traces of it continue filtering downward from the surface. Above lies an ocean familiar to seabirds, dolphins, and fishing boats. Below begins an environment where the sun no longer controls daily life in the way it does on land. Here, many animals stop relying on reflected light altogether. Instead, they create light themselves. At first, the idea seems almost magical. A tiny flash appears in the darkness, then another somewhere farther away, then a brief streak as something swims out of sight. Yet these lights are not decorations. They are tools shaped by evolution for survival. Bioluminescence is one of the defining features of the deep ocean, because producing light can solve many different problems in a place where sunlight no longer reaches. Some animals use flashes to attract prey, dangling glowing lures before unsuspecting victims. Others use sudden bursts to startle predators, buying precious moments to escape. Certain squid illuminate their undersides to erase their silhouettes when viewed from below, making themselves nearly invisible against the faint light filtering down from the surface. Tiny crustaceans eject glowing clouds that function almost like underwater smoke screens. Countless species communicate through patterns of light that remain invisible to everything, except the animals capable of recognizing them. To us, the darkness appears absolute. To the creatures living within it, the water often sparkles with countless biological signals, each carrying information about danger, food, or reproduction. The sperm whale passes through this glowing world without producing light of its own. It has no need to. Its echoes reveal what the flashes cannot. Among the countless animals inhabiting these waters, one group dominates almost every survey scientists conduct. Lanternfish rarely attract public attention, yet they may collectively represent one of the largest vertebrate biomasses on Earth. Most grow only a few centimeters long, but their numbers are extraordinary. During daylight, they remain in deeper waters where darkness offers protection from visual predators. As night approaches, billions upon billions begin swimming upward towards surface waters rich in plankton and microscopic life. Before sunrise, they descend once again into the depths. This movement happens every day across enormous areas of the world's oceans. It has been called the largest migration on the planet, not because individual animals travel extraordinary distances, but because so many creatures participate simultaneously. From space, nothing reveals that it is happening. Beneath the waves, entire layers of living biomass are rising and falling like a slow underwater tide. Squid join this movement. Small fish follow. Predators pursue them. Energy captured near the surface is carried downward through countless feeding interactions before beginning the journey upward again. The deep sea is not separated from the surface ocean. It breathes with it. For a sperm whale, understanding this rhythm is essential. Hunting success depends not only on locating prey, but also on anticipating where that prey will be. Echoes reveal the immediate surroundings, yet the whale's movements suggest knowledge extending far beyond a single moment. Certain feeding grounds are visited repeatedly across seasons and years. Some continental slopes consistently attract whales, while seemingly similar areas remain almost unused. Scientists studying tagged individuals have begun recognizing patterns linking whale behavior to underwater geography. Beneath the smooth surface of the ocean lies an invisible landscape, every bit as dramatic as mountains, valleys, and river systems on land. Continental shelves eventually plunge into steep slopes, dropping toward the abyss. Massive submarine canyons carve through the seafloor, some larger than the Grand Canyon itself. Ancient underwater mountains rise thousands of meters from surrounding plains. Ocean currents collide with these structures, forcing nutrient-rich water upward toward the surface in places known as upwelling zones. Where nutrients increase, microscopic phytoplankton flourish. Zooplankton feed upon them. Small fish gather. Squid arrive in pursuit. Larger predators follow behind. The sperm whale is not searching randomly through a featureless ocean. It is navigating a landscape shaped by geology, chemistry, and physics, where life concentrates around predictable hotspots created by processes invisible from above. These underwater feeding grounds help explain why sperm whales appear more frequently in certain regions than others. Off the edges of continents, where deep water approaches relatively close to shore, productive habitats often develop that support rich communities of squid and deep-water fish. Ocean fronts, where different water masses meet, can similarly concentrate prey. Seasonal changes alter temperatures, currents, and productivity, shifting the distribution of food through the year. Mature males feeding in colder northern or southern waters often exploit different prey communities than females living with calves in tropical and subtropical regions. Their diets, movements, and diving behavior reflect the ecological opportunities surrounding them. Even within the same species, there is no single universal hunting strategy. Every ocean writes slightly different rules, and sperm whales adapt accordingly. This flexibility has allowed them to occupy an astonishing proportion of Earth's marine environments. They are among the most widely distributed large mammals alive, not because every individual behaves identically, but because the species possesses remarkable ecological versatility. That versatility also reveals something deeper about the ocean itself. For centuries, humans tended to divide marine life into separate layers: surface animals, deep-sea animals, coastal species, and open ocean species. Modern research increasingly shows that these boundaries are far more connected than they first appear. A sperm whale may capture prey hundreds of meters beneath the surface before returning upward to breathe. Hours later, it releases waste near the upper layers of the ocean, returning nutrients that originated in deep water back toward the sunlit zone where microscopic plants can use them once again. These nutrients, including iron and nitrogen compounds, contribute to biological productivity, supporting countless other organisms. It is an extraordinary cycle. The whale feeds in darkness, but fertilizes life in sunlight. Every dive becomes part of a larger exchange, connecting two worlds that humans often imagine as separate. Scientists sometimes refer to this as the whale pump, recognizing that large marine mammals help redistribute nutrients vertically through the water column. Instead of allowing valuable elements to remain trapped at depth, whales repeatedly transport them upward, simply by living their ordinary lives. A single animal may perform this exchange thousands of times across decades. Multiply that by healthy populations moving through entire oceans, and the ecological significance becomes difficult to ignore. Yet even this is only part of the sperm whale's contribution to the hidden ecosystem. Every life eventually ends, even one capable of surviving 70 years or more. When a sperm whale dies far from shore, the body begins one final descent unlike any made during its lifetime. No muscles guide it now. No sonar scans the darkness ahead. Gravity alone carries the enormous carcass toward the seafloor. For scavengers, that arrival represents an event of extraordinary importance. Food is remarkably scarce across much of the deep ocean. Most organic matter drifting downward from the surface consists of tiny particles often described as marine snow, a slow, continuous rain of microscopic debris. Against that background, the arrival of a whale weighing tens of tons is comparable to an entire forest suddenly appearing in the middle of a desert. Sharks, hagfish, and other scavengers arrive first, stripping away soft tissues. Later, specialized worms capable of breaking down bone colonize the skeleton itself. Crustaceans, mollusks, bacteria, and countless other organisms follow in succession. Entire communities develop around the remains, supported by nutrients locked inside the whale's body. Some species appear to depend heavily on these rare events during their life cycles. Years may pass before the last useful material disappears. In death, the whale continues feeding the deep ocean exactly as it did in life. Only now the exchange flows in the opposite direction. Carbon captured near the surface becomes locked within the seafloor ecosystem rather than returning immediately to the atmosphere. The body that once traveled between worlds becomes a bridge connecting them permanently. Much of what scientists know about these remarkable ecological relationships has not come from watching them unfold directly. That remains one of the defining frustrations of deep ocean research. A whale may complete dozens of successful hunts before a single remotely operated vehicle arrives in the same region. Cameras reveal isolated moments rather than continuous stories. Instead, researchers assemble understanding the way detectives reconstruct an event from scattered evidence. Acoustic recordings reveal when whales are hunting. Suction cup tags record body orientation, movement, and sound production. Stable isotope analysis provides clues about long-term diet by examining chemical signatures stored within tissues. Squid beaks recovered from stomach contents identify prey species because their hard chitin resists digestion. Oceanographic surveys map prey distributions. Satellite observations measure productivity at the surface. Mathematical models combine these independent sources into increasingly detailed pictures of life hidden beneath the waves. No single method tells the whole story. Confidence emerges only when many different lines of evidence begin pointing toward the same conclusion. It is painstaking work, requiring patience on a scale remarkably similar to the patience shown by the whales themselves. Every discovery arrives slowly. Every answer uncovers another mystery waiting farther below. Perhaps that is why the deep sea continues captivating scientists generation after generation. It remains one of the last great frontiers where imagination and evidence must constantly negotiate with one another. For the sperm whale, however, none of this is mysterious. The twilight zone, the migrations, the submarine canyons and invisible rivers of nutrients are simply the world into which it was born. It moves through this immense living system with a familiarity earned over millions of years of evolution. During much of every dive, it hunts alone, guided only by echoes returning through the darkness. Yet solitude during the hunt should never be mistaken for isolation in life. When the whale eventually turns upward and begins the long journey back toward the surface, it is not returning merely to breathe. It is returning to other sperm whales, and hidden within those gatherings is another surprise waiting to overturn everything we think we know about the largest toothed predator on Earth. The first thing a young sperm whale learns is not how to hunt. It learns how to stay close, long before it ever follows its mother into the darkness, before it understands the echoes filling the ocean around it, before it develops the strength to survive its own deep dives. It enters a world built entirely around family. This is where one of the greatest misconceptions about sperm whales quietly begins. For generations, they were described as solitary giants, mysterious wanderers disappearing alone into the abyss. And if someone encounters a massive bull drifting through cold northern waters today, that description can seem perfectly accurate. Yet it tells only one small part of the story. A sperm whale is not born into solitude. It is born into one of the most stable and long-lasting social systems found anywhere in the ocean. And understanding that changes almost everything about the animal itself. Moments after birth, the calf enters an environment unlike that of any land mammal. There is no solid ground waiting beneath it. Every movement depends on water supporting its body. Within seconds, it must reach the surface for its very first breath, guided not by instinct alone, but by the careful assistance of its mother, who positions herself beneath the newborn, gently lifting it upward. Around them, other females often remain close. Their presence is no coincidence. Birth rarely happens in complete isolation because survival during these first moments depends upon cooperation. A calf entering the world is vulnerable in ways that an adult sperm whale has almost forgotten. It cannot dive deeply. It cannot swim efficiently over long distances. Its muscles are still developing, its lungs are experiencing the ocean for the very first time, and its enormous brain, already among the largest of any newborn mammal relative to body size, has barely begun absorbing the information that will shape the rest of its life. For weeks and months afterward, almost every decision made by the social group takes that calf into account. This is not a collection of unrelated animals temporarily traveling together. It is a family whose movements revolve around the youngest members. Adult females spend years within remarkably stable social units, composed of mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, and their offspring. Genetic studies have confirmed that many of these companions remain together for decades, creating societies built on relationships that often last a lifetime. Unlike many mammals where offspring leave soon after maturity and families dissolve into separate lives, female sperm whales frequently remain with close relatives indefinitely. The result is a community in which experience accumulates across generations. Older females share the ocean with daughters that eventually become mothers themselves, while calves grow surrounded not only by one parent, but by an entire network of familiar individuals. To an outside observer, the group may appear loosely organized as whales surface and dive in different positions, but beneath that apparent simplicity lies an intricate social structure held together by recognition, memory, and communication. The ocean is vast beyond comprehension. A single social unit may travel through thousands of kilometers of open water, where every direction appears almost identical to human eyes. Yet its members repeatedly find one another, coordinate movements, and remain together year after year. That continuity requires far more than instinct. It requires relationships. One of the clearest demonstrations of those relationships appears whenever calves are too young to accompany adults into the depths. A newborn simply cannot follow its mother during a hunting dive lasting close to an hour or more. Its body lacks the oxygen reserves, muscular development, and physiological adaptations needed for such an extreme journey. If every adult disappeared beneath the surface at the same time, the calves would be left exposed near the surface where danger is greatest. Instead, researchers have observed behavior suggesting remarkable coordination. While some females descend to feed, others often remain nearer the surface with the young. The exact organization varies between groups and circumstances, and scientists remain careful not to describe it as a rigid system with assigned roles. Nevertheless, evidence strongly suggests forms of alloparental care, in which females help watch, protect, or accompany calves that are not their own. In effect, motherhood becomes a shared responsibility. This behavior offers advantages extending far beyond simple protection. It allows mothers opportunities to replenish energy through feeding dives while reducing the time calves spend unattended. It also exposes young whales to multiple adults throughout development, increasing opportunities for social learning. Much of what makes a sperm whale successful cannot be inherited genetically alone. Hunting techniques, communication patterns, travel routes, and social interactions all unfold within a cultural environment shaped by older animals. Every calf grows up surrounded by teachers, even if those teachers never consciously intend to instruct. Childhood in the open ocean is therefore not merely a period of physical growth, but one of constant observation. The calf follows adults closely, matching their movements long before understanding their purpose. It hears clicks echoing through the water before it is capable of producing powerful echolocation signals itself. It experiences the rhythms of diving and surfacing, learning that the ocean is organized according to patterns invisible to the eye. Day after day, the group moves through waters where feeding grounds shift with currents and seasons, gradually introducing the youngest generation to a world too large for any individual to master alone. Unlike predators whose offspring become independent within months, sperm whales invest years in development. That unusually long childhood reflects the complexity of the life awaiting them. Becoming a successful deep-sea hunter demands far more than growing larger. It requires mastering an acoustic world unlike anything humans experience. As calves mature, their dives become progressively deeper and longer. At first, they remain close to the surface, limited by bodies still developing the remarkable oxygen storage systems possessed by adults. Gradually, those limits expand, muscles strengthen, myoglobin concentrations increase, breath-holding capacity improves. The whale learns through experience exactly how its changing body responds beneath increasing pressure. There is no sudden moment when childhood ends and adulthood begins. Instead, independence emerges through countless dives, each extending slightly farther than the last. Play also forms an important part of this development. Young sperm whales chase one another, roll together and make frequent physical contact, behavior that may strengthen social bonds while improving coordination and motor skills. To human observers, such moments can appear surprisingly gentle for animals destined to become among the largest predators on Earth. Yet play is common across highly intelligent mammals because it provides opportunities to practice behaviors in low-risk situations. What appears carefree often prepares individuals for the challenges of adulthood. Near the surface, calves remain vulnerable to predators capable of exploiting their limited diving ability. Orcas are among the few animals known to attack sperm whales, particularly targeting young, weakened, or isolated individuals. Accounts from researchers describe extraordinary defensive responses when such threats appear. Adults gather around the calves, forming tight protective circles with vulnerable animals sheltered toward the center, while large bodies face outward. Historical observers sometimes described these formations using military language, comparing them to defensive fortresses or battle strategies. The reality is likely more fluid than such descriptions suggest, yet the effectiveness remains undeniable. Cooperation dramatically increases the chances of survival. A lone calf represents an opportunity. A united group of enormous whales presents an entirely different challenge. These moments remind us that social living carries benefits extending beyond communication and reproduction. Family can mean survival itself. Eventually, however, childhood reaches a turning point, especially for young males. During the early years, their lives closely resemble those of female calves. They travel within the same family groups, share the same caregivers, and learn the same social patterns. But as adolescence approaches, biology begins redirecting their future along a completely different path. Males grow faster than females, and the difference soon becomes impossible to ignore. By adulthood, a mature bull may weigh more than twice as much as a female and reach significantly greater lengths. This extreme sexual dimorphism ranks among the most pronounced of any whale species. Such enormous size demands enormous quantities of food. Remaining permanently within warm tropical waters where mothers raise calves would make sustaining those energetic requirements increasingly difficult. Instead, young males gradually spend more time away from their natal units. The separation is not abrupt. It unfolds over years, with adolescents forming loose associations alongside other males, while slowly moving toward higher latitudes. Their destination lies in colder oceans, where productivity often supports richer feeding opportunities. Here, another remarkable transformation begins. The same species now experiences an entirely different world. Mature bulls roam regions far removed from the warm breeding waters occupied by females and calves. Ice may form nearby during winter. Day length changes dramatically across the seasons. Prey communities differ. Dives may target different species at different depths. The ocean itself seems almost unrecognizable compared with the one remembered from childhood. Yet these northern and southern feeding grounds provide the energy required to support the immense bodies of adult males. Large size may also offer additional advantages in cold environments. Bigger animals generally lose heat more slowly because of their lower surface area-to-volume ratio, making it easier to retain warmth during prolonged exposure to frigid water. Thick blubber further improves insulation while serving as an important energy reserve. The giant bull drifting alone through polar seas is therefore not simply wandering without purpose. It occupies an ecological niche fundamentally different from that of the females it left behind years earlier. Even its voice begins changing. Researchers studying sperm whale acoustics have documented differences in click characteristics between demographic groups. Body size influences sound production, and mature males often generate lower frequency components than smaller individuals. These differences are subtle compared with the dramatic songs of humpback whales, yet they remind us that growth alters not only appearance, but also the acoustic identity of the animal. Every stage of life leaves its own signature within the sounds traveling through the water. After years feeding in distant oceans, mature bulls periodically undertake immense migrations back toward lower latitudes where females gather. Here, the two lives briefly intersect once more. Competition among males can be intense because access to breeding opportunities is limited both in space and time. A bull may spend only a relatively small portion of its life alongside female groups before departing again for distant feeding grounds. This cycle repeats over decades. Seen from above, it can create the misleading impression that sperm whales are inconsistent in their behavior, solitary in one ocean and highly social in another. In reality, both observations are true because they describe different lives unfolding within the same species. A female born into a stable social unit may spend nearly her entire existence surrounded by familiar relatives, raising calves that eventually become lifelong companions themselves. A male born beside her follows an entirely different trajectory, growing into a giant traveler, crossing entire ocean basins before briefly returning to reproduce. Two animals sharing the same genetic heritage experience remarkably different worlds. Physical size explains part of that difference, but it cannot explain everything. Something less obvious continues holding female societies together across decades, despite the immensity of the oceans they inhabit. Long after individual whales disappear beneath the surface, long after calves become adults and mothers become grandmothers, invisible patterns continue passing between them through the water. They are patterns of sound, repeated, recognized, and remembered, carrying information that allows one whale to distinguish not only another individual, but the community to which it belongs. The clicks traveling between members of a sperm whale family sound nothing like the powerful acoustic pulses that guided a hunter through the darkness only moments before. During a deep foraging dive, every click served a practical purpose. It measured distance, revealed movement, and built a constantly updating acoustic image of an invisible world. Efficiency mattered. Precision mattered. The rhythm changed only as prey was detected, pursued, and captured. But when the whales return to one another near the surface, something else begins to fill the water. The sharp search clicks become less frequent, replaced by short, rhythmic sequences unlike anything used during hunting. To the human ear, they can sound deceptively simple, almost like someone tapping a wooden table with irregular pauses between each knock. Click, 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 click. At first they seem repetitive. Listen longer, however, and subtle differences begin to emerge. The spacing changes, the tempo shifts, certain patterns appear again and again among the same animals. Others are never heard from them at all. The whales are no longer mapping the ocean around them. They are communicating with one another. For much of human history, nobody realized these sounds even existed. Early whalers described sperm whales as strangely quiet, compared with the haunting songs later made famous by humpback whales. The reason was simple. Most of the important conversations happened beneath the surface, beyond the reach of human hearing. Only with the development of sensitive underwater hydrophones during the 20th century did researchers begin recording the hidden acoustic lives of toothed whales. What they discovered gradually transformed sperm whales from giant solitary predators into members of one of the most culturally fascinating societies ever studied outside our own species. These social sounds became known as codas. A coda is not a word, nor is it a sentence in the human sense. It is a recognizable pattern of clicks, produced in specific rhythmic arrangements. Some consist of only a few clicks, separated by characteristic pauses. Others contain more complex timing. Researchers describe them using shorthand based on the number of clicks and the intervals between them. A pattern sometimes called a 5 regular coda, for example, contains 5 clicks spaced at nearly even intervals. Another may begin slowly, before ending with rapid clicks compressed together. To an inexperienced listener, they may appear almost identical. To the whales themselves, those tiny differences seem to matter enormously. Understanding codas required solving 2 problems at once. Scientists first had to identify which whale was producing which sound, then determine whether particular individuals repeated the same patterns over time. That challenge demanded extraordinary patience. Researchers photographed the distinctive trailing edges of sperm whale tails as animals began their dives. Much like human fingerprints, the scars, nicks and shapes along each fluke remain remarkably stable, allowing individual whales to be recognized years later. At the same time, hydrophones recorded every coda exchanged beneath the surface. Gradually, photographs and acoustic recordings were linked together. A whale seen today could be recognized next year. Its sounds could be compared across decades. Family relationships could be reconstructed. What initially appeared to be random clicking slowly resolved into structured social behavior. One of the first remarkable discoveries was consistency. Members of the same social unit often shared similar repertoires of codas. They did not produce every possible rhythm available. Instead, particular click patterns appeared repeatedly within the same families, while different groups favored noticeably different combinations. The effect resembles regional accents more than completely different languages. People growing up in neighboring cities may speak the same language, while pronouncing words with distinctive rhythms learned during childhood. Sperm whales appear to develop comparable acoustic traditions, although scientists remain careful not to force direct comparisons with human speech. Similarity does not necessarily mean equivalence, yet the parallels are fascinating enough that they continue driving decades of research. Imagine floating beneath a family of sperm whales. One female produces a familiar rhythmic sequence. Almost immediately, another responds with a matching pattern, before a third contributes a slightly different variation. To us, the exchange might sound repetitive. To the whales, it may carry information about identity, affiliation, or social context that we still do not fully understand. The important point is not that humans have translated the conversation. We have not. The important point is that the whales clearly recognize structure where we initially perceived only noise. The ocean surrounding them is filled with meaning, hidden inside timing itself. As researchers expanded their recordings across different oceans, another surprise emerged. The differences extended far beyond individual families. Entire collections of social units shared characteristic coda repertoires while remaining socially associated with one another. Other nearby groups occupying the same general region consistently used different repertoires and rarely mixed socially despite overlapping geographically. Scientists eventually began referring to these larger cultural groupings as vocal clans. The word clan was chosen deliberately because the relationships appeared to extend beyond immediate family ties. Members recognized one another through shared traditions rather than simple genetic relatedness. This distinction fundamentally changed how researchers viewed sperm whale society. Genetics alone could not explain the patterns. In some regions, neighboring clans inhabited remarkably similar waters, feeding on comparable prey and encountering one another repeatedly, yet they maintained distinct social identities through behavior and communication rather than physical separation. Their differences appeared to be learned. This possibility reaches into one of biology's most fascinating ideas: culture. Human beings often treat culture as something uniquely our own, built through language, art, and shared history. Modern biology paints a more nuanced picture. Culture, in its broadest scientific sense, refers to information transmitted socially rather than genetically. If one generation teaches another behaviors that persist through learning instead of inheritance, culture has entered the story. Sperm whales provide some of the strongest evidence for this process outside humanity. A calf, born into one vocal clan, hears its family's characteristic rhythms from the first weeks of life. Day after day, those acoustic patterns surround it, while older females communicate nearby. As the young whale matures, it gradually begins producing similar codas itself. There is no indication that these rhythms are encoded like eye color or blood type. Instead, they appear to be acquired through prolonged social exposure, much as children absorb the sounds and cadence of the people raising them. That insight forces an entirely different way of thinking about whale populations. We are no longer looking only at biological evolution unfolding across thousands of generations. We are also watching traditions move through societies in real time. A behavioral innovation spreading through one clan may never appear in another, despite both sharing the same species. Researchers have documented differences extending beyond vocal behavior alone. Certain vocal clans display distinctive movement patterns, preferred habitats and social tendencies. Some appear more likely to use particular feeding regions than neighboring clans. Others organize themselves differently while traveling. None of these differences imply that one strategy is superior. Instead, they suggest multiple successful ways of living within the same ocean, each maintained through cultural transmission rather than genetic isolation. In other words, different sperm whale societies may possess different ways of being sperm whales. That idea would have sounded extraordinary only a few decades ago. Today it forms one of the most exciting areas of marine mammal research. Long-term studies have also revealed that these cultural landscapes are not fixed forever. Certain vocal clans become common within a region for decades before declining or disappearing, while others gradually expand into areas where they were previously absent. Environmental change may influence some of these shifts, but culture itself also evolves. Traditions persist only while they continue being learned by successive generations. Individual whales eventually die. Social knowledge can survive them. A coda pattern heard today may have echoed through the same family long before any living whale was born. This continuity mirrors one of the defining strengths of culture. It allows information to outlive individuals. A society becomes something larger than the sum of its members. Such discoveries have inspired entirely new approaches to studying whale communication. Modern hydrophone networks record enormous acoustic datasets impossible for humans to analyze click by click. Machine learning systems now assist researchers by identifying recurring patterns, clustering similar codas, and searching for hidden regularities that would otherwise remain invisible. Rather than asking only whether whales repeat certain rhythms, scientists are beginning to investigate the internal architecture of those rhythms. Tiny differences in timing, spacing, and tempo may prove more significant than previously recognized. Some codas appear remarkably stereotyped. Others allow subtle variation without losing their recognizable identity. This flexibility suggests a communication system richer than once imagined, while still resisting simplistic comparisons with human language. It is tempting to jump ahead and declare that sperm whales possess a language waiting to be translated. Headlines suggesting exactly that appear regularly whenever new studies are published. The reality is both more cautious and, in many ways, even more fascinating. Human language possesses properties, including syntax, productivity, and symbolic reference, that allow an effectively limitless range of meanings to be generated from finite elements. Whether sperm whale communication shares any of these properties remains unknown. Scientists have demonstrated structured vocal repertoires, socially learned traditions, individual variation, and cultural transmission. They have not demonstrated that each coda corresponds to a specific word or sentence. Assuming that every click sequence directly translates into human concepts risks misunderstanding an entirely different form of intelligence. Communication does not need to resemble speech in order to be extraordinarily sophisticated. Consider music. A symphony conveys emotion, expectation, and identity without functioning as spoken language. Birdsong communicates territory and reproductive condition without resembling conversation. Human facial expressions transmit complex social information without using words at all. Nature repeatedly demonstrates that information can move between minds through many different channels. Sperm whale codas may represent another such system, one shaped not by forests or open skies, but by an ocean where sound travels farther than light ever could. Every new discovery, therefore, raises two equally important responsibilities. The first is curiosity, pushing deeper into one of the least understood communication systems on Earth. The second is restraint, resisting the urge to oversimplify remarkable findings into stories more dramatic than the evidence supports. The whales do not become less extraordinary because we cannot translate their conversations. If anything, the mystery deepens. Somewhere beneath the waves, families have been exchanging these rhythmic patterns for countless generations, maintaining identities, traditions, and social relationships that continue unfolding whether humans understand them or not. The existence of culture alone changes how we see the species. A sperm whale is no longer simply an enormous predator navigating the deep ocean through biology alone. It is also born into a community shaped by inherited traditions, where knowledge passes from one generation to the next through years of social learning. And every culture depends on one fragile process above all others. Someone must teach it, and someone else must be young enough to learn. The most important lessons in a sperm whale's life do not begin during its first successful hunt in the darkness below. They begin at the surface, beside its mother, while an entirely new mind slowly learns to recognize the rhythms that will shape the rest of its existence. The first breath lasts only a moment, yet everything that follows depends on it. Before birth, the calf has never experienced air. Its entire existence has unfolded inside the warm protection of its mother's body, suspended within water, while oxygen arrived through an umbilical connection. Then, almost instantly, the environment changes. A body weighing hundreds of kilograms enters an ocean stretching farther than any horizon, and within seconds it must perform something no whale ever stops doing for the rest of its life. It must reach the surface and breathe. Unlike seals or sea turtles that can haul themselves onto land, a newborn sperm whale has no safe shoreline waiting nearby. There is no nest, no cave, no place to recover while strength slowly develops. Life begins in open water, where movement never truly stops, and survival depends on remaining buoyant from the very first moment. Researchers who have been fortunate enough to witness sperm whale births describe an atmosphere that appears calm on the surface, but is filled with careful coordination beneath it. The mother usually positions herself below the calf, gently supporting the newborn as it drifts upward. Other females often remain nearby, not because every birth unfolds identically, but because sperm whales live within close social units, where the arrival of a new calf concerns more than a single individual. The newborn reaches the surface, breaks through the water, and takes its first breath. That simple act represents one of the most profound transitions in mammalian life. From that point forward, every dive, every migration, and every hunt will be measured against a single unavoidable fact. Oxygen exists above the sea, not within it. The calf has entered a world where breathing requires constant return. Those first weeks reveal just how different the life of a young sperm whale is from that of the enormous adults disappearing into the deep ocean. A mature female may remain underwater for close to an hour during a routine feeding dive, descending hundreds of meters before returning with astonishing precision to the surface. A newborn cannot even begin to attempt such journeys. Its body is still developing the specialized adaptations that define its species. The muscles contain only a fraction of the oxygen-storing myoglobin found in adults. The blood carries smaller reserves. The diving reflex exists but has not yet reached the efficiency that decades of growth will eventually produce. Most importantly, experience cannot be inherited. Every successful dive an adult performs is built upon thousands that came before it. The calf starts with none of that knowledge. It remains close to the surface because the surface is where life is still possible. That dependence creates an extraordinary challenge for the entire family. Every adult needs food gathered from deep beneath the waves, yet someone must always remain aware of the calves waiting above. Long-term observations suggest that females coordinate their diving in ways that reduce the time young whales are left without experienced adults nearby. Researchers remain careful not to describe this as a rigid schedule or organized rotation, because the ocean rarely follows such simple rules. Instead, different mothers appear to adjust their behavior according to the age of their calves, the presence of other females, and the circumstances surrounding the group. The result is a remarkably flexible form of cooperative care. A calf may spend time swimming alongside its own mother before gradually drifting close to another familiar female while the mother descends to feed. This behavior, known as alloparental care, has been documented in many highly social mammals, from elephants to killer whales, and sperm whales provide some of the strongest marine examples. The calf grows up surrounded not only by one caregiver, but by an entire network of familiar adults whose lives remain deeply connected. Milk becomes the foundation of that growth. Producing it demands enormous amounts of energy from the mother, who must repeatedly descend into the deep sea to replace the calories transferred to her offspring. Whale milk bears little resemblance to the diluted milk humans pour into a glass. Rich in fat and nutrients, it provides the concentrated energy needed for rapid development in cold ocean water. Nursing itself is a surprisingly intimate process beneath the surface. The calf positions itself beneath the mother's body and receives milk directly from the mammary glands, while both animals remain submerged. There are no pauses to breathe during feeding. Everything happens within the fluid environment the calf has inhabited since before birth. As weeks become months, the young whale grows with remarkable speed, adding hundreds of kilograms while gradually developing the insulation, muscle mass, and oxygen reserves that will eventually allow it to follow the adults farther into the ocean. Yet physical growth alone does not explain how a sperm whale becomes a successful adult. Every day the calf is surrounded by sounds carrying information it cannot fully understand. Powerful echolocation clicks from hunting adults pass through the water. Rhythmic social codas ripple between nearby females. Distant calls from other whales drift across kilometers of open sea. Long before it can produce sophisticated acoustic signals itself, the calf is immersed in an invisible soundscape, shaping its understanding of the world. Human infants begin recognizing familiar voices before they speak their first words. Young sperm whales appear to experience something similar, though expressed through an entirely different sensory system. They spend years hearing the characteristic rhythms of their social unit, the hunting clicks of experienced adults, and the countless underwater noises defining life in the ocean. Eventually, they begin experimenting with their own vocalizations, producing immature sounds that gradually become more consistent as their anatomy and neurological development progress. Researchers continue investigating exactly how these acoustic abilities mature, but there is little doubt that learning plays a substantial role. Echolocation is not merely a biological switch that activates at a certain age. It is a sensory skill refined through continuous interaction with the surrounding environment. Movement develops in much the same way. At first, the calf swimming appears hesitant compared with the effortless efficiency of the adults. It surfaces more frequently, changes direction abruptly, and remains close beside experienced whales. Gradually, those movements become smoother. The calf learns how to coordinate breathing with swimming, how to conserve energy during longer journeys, and how to position itself within the moving group. Even simple behaviors such as surfacing require remarkable precision. A whale cannot afford to waste unnecessary energy repeatedly accelerating upward or descending too steeply after breathing. Over time, these movements become almost invisible in their efficiency, but every adult once learned them through practice rather than instinct alone. Play occupies an important place within that learning process. Young sperm whales chase one another, roll together beneath the surface, gently push with their heads, and engage in prolonged physical contact that appears far removed from feeding or migration. Scientists avoid attributing human motives such as fun or amusement without evidence, yet play is widely recognized across intelligent mammals as a context in which motor skills, coordination, and social relationships develop. A calf interacting with another young whale is simultaneously learning balance, body control, and the subtle signals regulating social behavior. Mistakes carry relatively little cost during play compared with mistakes made while avoiding predators or navigating the deep sea. Evolution repeatedly favors such low-risk opportunities for learning. Observation may prove equally important. Young whales spend years watching adults disappear beneath the surface and return from unseen hunts. They experience repeated migrations across the same regions of ocean, gradually becoming familiar with seasonal movements and productive feeding grounds. Scientists suspect that much of this ecological knowledge is acquired socially rather than discovered independently by every generation. Certain travel routes persist across decades. Particular feeding areas continue attracting the same family groups. Exactly how much of this information calves learn by following experienced adults remains difficult to measure, but evidence increasingly supports the idea that sperm whales inherit not only genes but also accumulated knowledge. Life in the open ocean, however, offers no guarantees. A calf represents one of the most vulnerable members of the community, precisely because it cannot yet exploit the safety of extreme depth. Orcas remain the principal natural predators capable of threatening sperm whales, and although attacks are relatively uncommon, they can become deadly when directed toward young or weakened individuals. Historical observations from whalers and modern scientific expeditions describe remarkable defensive responses whenever danger approaches. Adults gather closely around vulnerable whales, arranging themselves so that calves remain protected near the center while larger bodies face outward. This arrangement has often been called a marguerite formation because, viewed from above, the whales resemble the petals of a daisy radiating around its center. The name captures the appearance without implying that the whales consciously plan geometric formations. Reality is almost certainly more fluid than the term suggests. Individuals constantly adjust their positions as predators move. The sea changes and calves shift within the group. Rather than imagining a rehearsed military strategy, it is more accurate to see the behavior as an emergent consequence of experienced adults repeatedly placing themselves between danger and the most vulnerable members of their society. Not every challenge arrives in the form of a predator. Illness, injury, and simple separation from the group may all threaten a young whale's survival. A calf losing contact with its mother in the immensity of the open ocean faces extraordinary risks. Fortunately, the close social cohesion characteristic of female sperm whales appears to reduce such events. Continuous acoustic communication helps maintain contact even when visibility is limited or individuals momentarily disappear beneath the surface. Yet despite these advantages, not every calf survives to adulthood. Mortality remains part of life, shaped by environmental conditions, disease, food availability, and unpredictable events that scientists rarely witness directly. The ocean conceals both its triumphs and its tragedies. For those that survive, childhood stretches across many years before gradually giving way to independence. Females remain within the family groups that shaped their earliest memories, eventually contributing to the same cooperative society that once protected them. Males begin following a different path. As adolescence progresses, their increasing size and nutritional demands encourage longer movements away from the natal unit. What begins as occasional separation eventually becomes permanent. The young male enters a life defined by distance, traveling toward colder, more productive waters where the enormous body of an adult bull can be sustained. It is one of the most dramatic life transitions found among marine mammals. The familiar voices surrounding childhood fade behind him while entirely new oceans lie ahead. That journey marks only the beginning of another education. A male may spend decades traveling through environments his mother never experiences, gradually accumulating the physical scars and behavioral knowledge that define maturity. Sperm whales are exceptionally long-lived animals. Many females live well beyond 60 years, while some males may approach or exceed 70 under favorable conditions. Such longevity allows experience to accumulate across an astonishing span of time. A mature whale may have crossed ocean basins repeatedly, encountered changing climates, survived unusual prey shortages, and navigated waters transformed by human activity. Memory almost certainly plays an important role in these lives, although scientists remain cautious about extending conclusions beyond available evidence. We know sperm whales recognize individuals after long separations. We know they maintain stable social traditions across generations. We know they repeatedly return to familiar regions over many years. Exactly how these memories are stored, organized, and used remains one of the great unanswered questions in marine biology. Perhaps that uncertainty is fitting. The longer researchers study sperm whales, the more they discover that the most important parts of their lives often unfold where direct observation becomes impossible. Knowledge must be assembled patiently from fragments, a photograph taken decades apart, a familiar coda recorded by a hydrophone, the path traced by a satellite tag, or the scars carried silently upon a whale's skin. As young whales grow older, those bodies begin recording encounters no scientist has ever watched unfold. Circular marks appear along the head, flanks, and tail, pale rings etched into dark skin, like signatures left behind by invisible hands. Each scar tells us that somewhere in the darkness below, another extraordinary animal reached out with remarkable strength, leaving behind evidence of a struggle that humans almost never witness, but that has shaped the lives of sperm whales for millions of years. Circular scars tell stories that no human has ever watched unfold. A researcher standing beside a living sperm whale, or examining photographs taken from a small boat, may notice pale rings scattered across its massive body. Some are no larger than a hand. Others stretch wider than a dinner plate, faint white circles standing out against the whale's dark grey skin. Many appear on the head and shoulders. Others run along the flanks or disappear beneath the surface before their full pattern can be seen. At first glance, they almost resemble old burns or healed wounds from an unknown accident. Yet these markings have fascinated naturalists for centuries because they seem to hint at encounters taking place in one of the least explored environments on Earth. Every scar asks the same question: what happened hundreds of meters below the surface where no one was watching? Long before submarines, underwater cameras or satellite tags existed, sailors already believed they knew the answer. If enormous circular marks covered the bodies of whales, then surely they must have come from enormous tentacles. The image was irresistible. Somewhere beneath the sea, giant whales and giant squid were locked in battles so dramatic that the scars eventually surfaced even if the fight itself never did. Artists filled books with impossible scenes of whales wrapped in monstrous arms while ships drifted nearby beneath storm clouds. The illustrations became increasingly elaborate with every retelling. Tentacles stretched longer than sailing vessels. Squid grew into sea monsters capable of dragging whales beneath the waves. By the 19th century, these encounters had become part of maritime folklore, blending genuine observations with imagination, until separating one from the other became almost impossible. The truth, as so often happens with sperm whales, turned out to be both less theatrical and far more remarkable. The scars are real, the squid are real, the encounters are real, but understanding what they actually represent requires following evidence rather than legend. One of the strongest pieces of evidence lies not on the whale's skin, but inside its stomach. Unlike fish, whose bones are gradually dissolved during digestion, squid possess hard, chitinous beaks, positioned at the center of their arms. These structures function much like the beak of a parrot, allowing squid to slice prey into manageable pieces before swallowing them. Chitin resists digestion remarkably well. Soft tissues disappear inside the whale's digestive system, while the beaks remain largely intact. For marine biologists, they become something extraordinary: durable records of meals consumed far beyond direct observation. Over decades, researchers have recovered thousands upon thousands of squid beaks from stranded sperm whales. Carefully cleaned, measured, and compared with reference collections, these beaks reveal far more than simply the presence of squid. Their shape identifies species. Their size provides clues about the size of the original animal. Entire diets can be reconstructed from these tiny structures alone. It is painstaking work requiring immense expertise because many deep-sea squid species remain unfamiliar even today. Yet the results have fundamentally transformed our understanding of sperm whale feeding ecology. Instead of depending upon a single legendary prey animal, sperm whales consume an astonishing diversity of cephalopods alongside numerous species of deep-water fish. Giant squid unquestionably appear among those prey, but they represent only one thread within a much larger ecological story. This distinction matters because popular culture often reduces the sperm whale to a specialist giant squid hunter, as though every dive ends with another battle against a mythical monster. Reality is more flexible. The importance of giant squid varies between regions, individuals, and seasons. In some oceans, they may contribute substantially to the diet. Elsewhere, smaller squid dominate. Different populations exploit different prey communities depending upon what the surrounding ecosystem provides. A whale living near productive continental slopes may encounter prey unlike that available in remote ocean basins. Mature males feeding in colder waters often consume somewhat different species from females remaining in tropical breeding grounds. Adaptability, rather than dependence upon one spectacular prey item, helps explain the sperm whale's extraordinary global success. Even so, giant squid deserve their reputation as remarkable animals. For centuries, they remained among the greatest mysteries in zoology, because almost nobody had seen one alive. Knowledge came mainly from fragments washed ashore, or recovered from whale stomachs. Enormous eyes, among the largest in the animal kingdom, hinted at a life spent in perpetual darkness, where gathering every available photon mattered. Long feeding tentacles armed with powerful suckers suggested an active predator, rather than a passive drifter. Only in recent decades have deep-sea cameras finally captured living giant squid in their natural environment, confirming that these elusive animals inhabit the very depths routinely visited by sperm whales. Another species, the colossal squid, inhabits colder southern ocean waters and grows even heavier, with rotating hooks complementing its suckers. Yet, despite its formidable appearance, it occupies only part of the sperm whale's range. Not every whale ever encounters one. This again reminds us that the ocean contains many different worlds rather than one uniform abyss. The evidence linking whales and squid therefore comes from multiple independent sources. Stomach contents reveal what has been eaten. Circular scars demonstrate physical contact. Modern suction cup tags record hunting behavior in real time, showing rapid pursuit sequences consistent with prey capture. Stranded whales occasionally preserve partially digested remains, offering additional clues. Deep-sea cameras provide rare glimpses of the prey itself. None of these methods alone tells the complete story. Together, they form a remarkably consistent picture. The whale hunts squid. The squid defends itself. Sometimes the interaction leaves visible marks. Sometimes it does not. That last point is often overlooked. People naturally notice spectacular scars because they are easy to photograph. Yet many successful captures probably leave little permanent evidence at all. Smaller squid may be swallowed with minimal struggle. Even large individuals may fail to attach their tentacles effectively before being overpowered. Conversely, not every circular scar necessarily originates from squid. The skin of a sperm whale becomes a living archive accumulating many different experiences across decades. Mature males in particular often carry extensive parallel toothrake marks produced during interactions with other males. These long, pale scratches reflect social conflict associated with competition rather than feeding. Males rarely spend their lives together in stable family groups after adolescence, but when breeding opportunities arise, physical encounters may occur. Most appear limited rather than catastrophic, yet the skin preserves evidence long after the conflict ends. Parasites create other lesions. Encounters with fishing gear may leave distinctive injuries. Collisions with vessels sometimes produce entirely different patterns of damage. Environmental hazards add further complexity. Looking at a scar therefore resembles reading a single sentence torn from a much larger book. Sometimes the meaning is obvious. Often it remains uncertain. Circular sucker marks themselves become more complicated than they first appear, because the whale continues growing after many injuries occur. Skin stretches across an expanding body. A scar received by a younger whale may enlarge gradually over the following decades, making the original size of the attacking squid difficult to estimate. Without considering growth, it becomes tempting to imagine every large scar requiring an impossibly large tentacle. Researchers instead approach such evidence carefully, recognizing that the body carrying the scar today is not identical to the body that received it years earlier. Patience and restraint once again reveal a richer story than exaggeration ever could. So what might a realistic encounter actually look like? Picture the whale already hundreds of meters below the surface, moving steadily through complete darkness. Slow echolocation clicks spread ahead, searching a volume of water no eye could penetrate. Somewhere in that invisible space an echo changes. It returns differently from the countless reflections produced by fish schools or drifting particles. The whale alters course almost imperceptibly. Another click follows, then another. The target is moving. Click intervals shorten. The acoustic image sharpens. Every returning echo updates the whale's understanding of distance, direction, and speed. The squid almost certainly detects the approaching predator before contact occurs. Many deep-sea cephalopods possess sophisticated sensory systems capable of responding rapidly to disturbance. Exactly how they perceive an approaching sperm whale remains an active field of research, but there is little reason to imagine them as passive victims waiting motionless in the darkness. As the distance closes, the squid accelerates, the whale follows. The final seconds unfold beyond human sight, reconstructed only through acoustic recordings and biological evidence. Arms extend, tentacles shoot forward with astonishing speed, their suckers attempting to grip whatever they contact. Large squid possess powerful beaks capable of inflicting serious injury if an opportunity presents itself. The whale, however, outweighs even a giant squid many times over. Its jaws close with enormous force. The struggle, though potentially violent, is unlikely to resemble the prolonged wrestling matches popularized by adventure novels. Predation generally favors efficiency. The longer an encounter lasts, the greater the risk to both predator and prey. Evolution, therefore, rewards rapid resolution whenever possible. The squid's objective is escape rather than victory. The whale's objective is capture before escape becomes possible. In many cases, those objectives are decided within moments. A few suction cups maintain contact long enough to leave circular impressions on the whale's skin before tearing free. Elsewhere, the squid never secures a grip at all. Some whales surface carrying fresh scars. Others return without a visible mark, despite having hunted successfully. What remains most remarkable is not that these encounters occur, but that almost every detail reaches us indirectly. We know the participants. We know the outcome often favors the whale. We know the injuries preserved on skin and the beaks preserved within stomachs. Yet the actual confrontation usually unfolds in total darkness beyond the reach of every observer. Few natural events remain so simultaneously well supported and so rarely witnessed. Perhaps that explains why imagination filled the gaps so eagerly for centuries. Humans have always struggled to accept unanswered questions. Faced with fragments of evidence, we instinctively construct narratives connecting them together. Sometimes those stories become more famous than the reality inspiring them. In truth, uncertainty does not diminish the sperm whale's world. It deepens it. Every scar reminds us that an entire ecosystem continues operating almost independently of human observation. Every healed wound represents an interaction taking place where sunlight never reaches and cameras almost never arrive. There is something profoundly humbling about recognizing that the ocean still contains stories unfolding perfectly well without an audience. Ironically, while sailors spent centuries imagining impossible monsters attacking whales beneath the waves, they overlooked the greatest mystery carried by the whale itself. The scars fascinated them, the squid captivated them, but neither inspired as much obsession as the enormous block filling nearly a third of the animal's body. They harvested it by the thousands without truly understanding why it existed. They named the strange waxy substance inside it before they understood its purpose. For generations, the head remained the whale's greatest riddle, and solving that riddle would eventually reveal that the most extraordinary weapon in the deep ocean was never the squid's tentacles at all, but the remarkable biological machine that allowed the sperm whale to find them in complete darkness. The great industrial age did not begin with oil wells rising above deserts or pipelines crossing continents. Long before petroleum reshaped the modern world, much of humanity's growing demand for light, lubrication, and specialized materials came from living creatures pulled from the sea. Among them, no animal became more valuable than the sperm whale. It was hunted not because it was dangerous, nor because it was especially abundant, but because hidden inside its body were substances unlike anything people could produce themselves. Every successful voyage promised enormous financial reward. Entire ports grew wealthy because somewhere beyond the horizon, sperm whales continued following migration routes they had traveled for millions of years, completely unaware that another species had begun searching the oceans for them with increasing determination. To understand why this happened, it helps to remember what early whalers actually saw. When a sperm whale surfaced, the most striking feature was its immense block-shaped head. It accounted for nearly a third of the animal's total body length and an even greater proportion of its weight. After a whale was killed and processed, that head revealed an enormous cavity filled with a pale, waxy substance unlike ordinary animal fat. When warm, it resembled oil. When cooled, it hardened into a white, wax-like material with remarkable physical properties. Early whalers believed this mysterious substance was the whale's sperm, an understandable but entirely incorrect conclusion based on the limited anatomical knowledge of the time. The misunderstanding became so deeply rooted that it permanently entered the animal's name. Even after science demonstrated the error centuries later, the name sperm whale remained. Today we know the material is called spermaceti, and despite generations of research, its precise biological functions continue to be investigated. It occupies the vast spermaceti organ within the whale's forehead, working alongside surrounding tissues that help generate and shape the powerful echolocation system explored earlier in this story. Researchers have proposed additional roles involving buoyancy, sound transmission, and thermal regulation, although the acoustic function is now considered one of its most important contributions. Ironically, while industrial society treated spermaceti as a valuable raw material, the whale had evolved it for one of the most sophisticated sensory systems ever produced by nature. Humans saw a commodity. Evolution had built an acoustic instrument. That distinction would only become clear long after the commercial industry had already transformed entire economies. During the 18th and 19th centuries, spermaceti became one of the most sought-after substances in global trade. When refined, it produced candles of exceptional quality. Unlike many candles made from animal fats, spermaceti candles burned with a brighter, cleaner flame, produced less smoke, and emitted little unpleasant odor. In an age before electric lighting, this represented a significant technological advantage. Government buildings, churches, wealthy households, and navigational facilities all valued dependable illumination. Beyond lighting, spermaceti possessed remarkable lubricating properties. As the Industrial Revolution accelerated, machines capable of weaving cloth, printing newspapers, and manufacturing increasingly complex products depended upon reliable lubrication. Before petroleum-derived oils became widely available, sperm whale products helped keep those machines operating. Precision instruments, watches, and specialized industrial equipment all benefited from materials that remained stable under conditions where many alternatives performed poorly. To modernize, it seems extraordinary that one marine mammal could become so closely connected with factories, commerce, and technological progress unfolding thousands of kilometers from the nearest ocean. Yet that was precisely the reality of the period. Sperm oil extracted from the whale's blubber became equally valuable. Refined into lamp fuel and industrial lubricants, it entered international markets where demand continued growing alongside expanding economies. Entire business empires emerged around products ultimately originating from animals living in waters most consumers would never see. By the middle of the 19th century, whaling had evolved into one of the world's first truly global extractive industries. Ships departed from ports in New England, Britain, France, and elsewhere, before disappearing for years at a time. Crews crossed the Atlantic, rounded the southern tips of Africa or South America, and entered the vast Pacific in search of whales scattered across immense ocean basins. Success depended not upon fixed fishing grounds, but upon finding animals whose movements remained only partially understood. Every voyage became a mixture of navigation, endurance, and patience. Days often passed without a single sighting. Then someone stationed high in the mast would suddenly shout the words every crew longed to hear, "There she blows." That distant column of mist rising above the horizon marked far more than the location of a whale. It represented wages, profit, and the possibility that an exhausting expedition might finally justify itself. The large whaling ship could not pursue the whale directly with precision. Instead, several small open boats were lowered into the water, each carrying a handful of men armed with hand-thrown harpoons and lances. These boats approached under oars whenever possible, attempting to reach striking distance before the whale submerged again. It was dangerous work in every sense. A fully grown sperm whale outweighed the boats pursuing it by orders of magnitude. If wounded, it could accelerate with astonishing force, dragging boats across the sea at terrifying speed. In events sailors called Nantucket sleigh rides, oars snapped, lines tangled, boats capsized, men drowned. Most hunts ended with the whale dying after prolonged pursuit, but occasionally the balance shifted. The most famous example occurred in 1820, when the whale ship Essex encountered a large bull sperm whale in the Pacific Ocean. During the hunt, the whale rammed the vessel repeatedly until it sank. The surviving crew escaped in small boats, only to face months of starvation, dehydration, and unimaginable hardship before rescue. The disaster became one of the defining stories in maritime history. Decades later, it helped inspire Herman Melville while writing Moby Dick, transforming a real encounter into one of literature's greatest novels. Yet the fictional white whale and the real sperm whale should never be confused. Melville used the whale as a symbol of obsession, nature, fate, and humanity's struggle against forces beyond its control. The actual animal did not spend its life seeking revenge against ships. It hunted squid, raised calves, communicated through codas and crossed oceans following ecological rhythms millions of years older than human civilization. The danger faced by whalers came not from malice, but from attempting to kill one of the largest predators on Earth from a wooden boat scarcely larger than the whale's jaw. Nevertheless, stories spread far more easily than nuance. The image of the vengeful whale entered popular culture, reinforcing myths that persisted long after commercial whaling declined. Ironically, the same industry that misunderstood so much about sperm whales also produced one of the most valuable scientific archives ever assembled. Whaling captains kept meticulous logbooks, documenting weather, positions, voyage routes, and whale sightings. They did so for commercial reasons, hoping future expeditions would locate profitable hunting grounds more efficiently. 2 centuries later, those handwritten records became priceless to marine scientists. By comparing thousands of logbooks, researchers reconstructed historical distributions, migration patterns, and seasonal abundance from periods long before modern surveys existed. The notebooks intended to maximize whale harvest now help estimate what healthy whale populations may once have looked like. They reveal oceans that were profoundly different from those we know today. Exactly how many sperm whales were removed during the height of commercial whaling remains uncertain, but the numbers were enormous. Hundreds of thousands were killed across centuries of exploitation. Some estimates suggest that global populations were reduced by well over half before international protections eventually slowed the industry. The losses were not distributed evenly. Large adult males often became preferred targets because their immense heads contained greater quantities of valuable spermaceti. This selective pressure may have altered population structure in ways still being investigated. Removing the biggest breeding males year after year almost certainly changed the social landscape experienced by surviving whales. Fewer mature bulls meant different reproductive dynamics. It may also have reduced the pool of older, experienced individuals carrying decades of ecological knowledge. Unlike rapidly reproducing animals capable of replacing generations within a few years, sperm whales mature slowly. Females produce relatively few calves across long lifespans. Recovery therefore unfolds over decades rather than seasons. Even after commercial hunting largely ceased, rebuilding populations remained an exceptionally slow process. This long recovery also transformed humanity's relationship with the species. The same animal, once viewed primarily as a floating source of valuable oil, gradually became recognized as one of the most intelligent and socially complex mammals in the ocean. Scientific priorities changed accordingly. Harpoons gave way to cameras. Explosive lances were replaced by suction cup tags designed to detach harmlessly after recording dives and sounds. Instead of towing carcasses back to shore, researchers now launch drones to photograph living whales from above without disturbing them. Hydrophones lowered quietly into the sea record conversations rather than signaling a hunt. Satellite tracking reveals migrations that 19th century captains could only guess at. Advances in genetics allow scientists to reconstruct family relationships from tiny skin samples collected with minimal impact. The whale itself has not fundamentally changed during this transformation. Humans have. Our questions shifted from, how much can this animal provide us, to how does this extraordinary animal live? That change may represent one of the most important developments in conservation biology. Understanding became more valuable than extraction. Curiosity replaced exploitation as the primary motivation driving expeditions into the open ocean. Yet history continues shaping the present. Every sperm whale swimming through today's oceans carries the legacy of centuries during which its species was pursued across nearly every major ocean basin. Some populations are recovering, others remain far below historical numbers. Long generation times mean that scars left by industrial whaling persist not only on individual bodies, but within entire populations. The absence of older animals, the disruption of social structures, and the reduction of genetic diversity all unfold across timescales far longer than a human career. Conservation therefore requires patience matching the biology of the whales themselves. Protecting an animal capable of living 70 years means thinking not in election cycles or business quarters, but across generations. The harpoons have largely fallen silent, but that does not mean the challenges disappeared with them. The modern ocean presents dangers that earlier whalers could never have imagined. They arrive not from one pursuing ship, but from an entire civilization whose presence now reaches almost every corner of the sea through shipping lanes, fishing gear, underwater noise, pollution, and plastic drifting far beyond the coastline. Many of these threats leave no dramatic splash on the surface. They unfold quietly beneath the waves, surrounding sperm whales in ways every bit as profound as the fleets that once hunted them. The modern ocean is louder than any ocean a sperm whale has ever known. Not louder in the dramatic way humans usually imagine, with crashing storms or breaking waves, but louder beneath the surface, where sound travels nearly 5 times faster than it does through air, and can cross entire ocean basins under the right conditions. For an animal that depends on hearing more than sight, this change is as profound as filling a forest with permanent fog would be for a wolf or an eagle. Every important part of a sperm whale's life is shaped by sound. It hunts through sound. It recognizes family through sound. It navigates, explores, and experiences much of its world through sound. If earlier generations of sperm whales evolved in an ocean where natural noises came mainly from wind, waves, rain, earthquakes, volcanic activity, and other marine animals, today's whales inhabit an environment increasingly filled with engines, propellers, industrial surveys, and military technologies. The sea itself has become an acoustic landscape unlike anything their ancestors experienced, and understanding why that matters requires thinking like the whale rather than like ourselves. Human beings often underestimate underwater sound because we rarely experience it directly. On land, vision dominates our perception. We look before we listen. A distant city may disappear behind a hill, but we can still orient ourselves through landmarks, roads, and the position of the sun. The sperm whale experiences the opposite reality. In the deep ocean, darkness removes visual information long before hearing becomes unreliable. Sound is not a secondary sense. It is the primary way reality is assembled. Every echolocation click projects information outward. Every returning echo rebuilds the world in front of the whale. Every social coda confirms the presence of family somewhere beyond visible range. When noise enters that system, it does not simply make the ocean louder. It changes how clearly the whale can perceive its surroundings. Commercial shipping represents one of the largest contributors to this transformation. Tens of thousands of cargo vessels now cross the world's oceans every day, connecting continents through an almost continuous network of trade routes. Their engines, propellers, and machinery generate low-frequency sounds capable of traveling remarkable distances underwater. Unlike a passing speedboat that quickly disappears over the horizon, the combined effect of global shipping produces a persistent acoustic background extending across entire regions. Scientists comparing historical recordings with modern measurements have documented substantial increases in ambient ocean noise over the past century, particularly in heavily trafficked waters. To humans standing on deck, the engines may sound distant or insignificant. Beneath the surface, those same sounds spread through water for kilometers, overlapping with countless other vessels until they merge into a nearly continuous acoustic backdrop. The consequences are not always obvious, because whales do not simply stop communicating whenever a ship passes. Instead, the challenge resembles trying to hold a conversation inside an increasingly crowded room. At first, everyone hears one another clearly. As more voices fill the space, subtle words become harder to distinguish. Speakers may repeat themselves, wait for quieter moments, or unconsciously raise their voices. Marine mammals appear capable of similar adjustments under certain conditions, yet those adjustments have limits. Researchers refer to one important effect as acoustic masking. Sounds carrying useful biological information become partially hidden beneath background noise, reducing the distance over which they remain detectable. A coda that normally reaches another whale several kilometers away may become difficult to distinguish. An echo returning from prey may arrive against a noisier background than the whale evolved to process. The information has not disappeared entirely, but extracting it becomes more difficult. Exactly how much this affects sperm whales remains an active area of research, because the answer depends upon many variables. Different sounds occupy different frequencies. Different behaviors rely upon different parts of the acoustic spectrum. A hunting whale using high-frequency echolocation may experience certain noises differently from a social group exchanging codas near the surface. Ocean conditions also matter. Temperature, salinity, and underwater topography influence how sound travels. Even the whale's own behavior changes the equation. An animal resting quietly near the surface experiences a different acoustic environment from one actively hunting hundreds of meters below. These complexities remind us why simple statements such as "noise is bad for whales" rarely capture the full scientific picture. Reality is more nuanced. Not every sound produces the same response. Not every exposure has the same consequence. Some industrial sounds are particularly intense. Seismic exploration used in the search for oil and gas often relies on compressed air arrays, generating repeated acoustic pulses directed into the seafloor. By analyzing reflected signals, geologists reconstruct underground rock formations hidden beneath layers of sediment. These surveys can continue for days or weeks across extensive areas. Military and industrial sonar systems introduce additional sources of powerful underwater sound, although their characteristics differ substantially depending on the technology involved. Scientists have documented behavioral responses by various marine mammals to certain intense acoustic exposures, including changes in diving behavior, movement patterns, and habitat use. Determining whether those immediate responses translate into long-term population effects, however, remains one of the greatest challenges in marine ecology. Whales cannot tell researchers what they experienced. Instead, scientists combined satellite tracking, acoustic monitoring, behavioral observations, and physiological measurements in an effort to understand how repeated disturbance influences animals living in an increasingly noisy sea. Physical hazards present another layer of risk. Every time a sperm whale surfaces, it enters the same narrow band of water occupied by some of the largest moving machines humanity has ever built. Container ships traveling at cruising speed require enormous distances to stop or change course. A resting whale, particularly one recovering after a deep foraging dive, may remain relatively still near the surface while replenishing oxygen stores. From the bridge of a large vessel, detecting that whale in time to avoid a collision is not always possible. Ship strikes have become a recognized threat for several whale species, especially in heavily trafficked regions where migration routes intersect with shipping lanes. For sperm whales, the risk varies geographically because populations occupy different habitats and shipping density differs dramatically around the world. A whale crossing a busy commercial corridor faces very different conditions from one feeding in remote polar waters. Fishing gear introduces a different kind of danger because it remains present long after the vessel itself has disappeared. Modern fisheries deploy extensive networks of ropes, long lines, and traps, extending through large volumes of the water column. Sperm whales are intelligent, adaptable predators, and in some regions they have learned that fishing gear can provide easy opportunities. Long lines hauling valuable fish toward the surface sometimes attract whales that remove prey directly from the hooks, a behavior known as depredation. From the whale's perspective, the strategy can provide an efficient meal. From the fisher's perspective, it represents lost catch and damaged equipment. This creates an economic conflict in which both humans and whales respond to one another's behavior. Unfortunately, close interaction with fishing gear also increases the risk of entanglement. Heavy ropes may wrap around fins, tails, or jaws. Tightening under tension, they can create deep wounds, restrict movement, or interfere with feeding. Some whales eventually free themselves, carrying permanent scars that remain visible for decades. Others are less fortunate. The ocean preserves these encounters quietly, leaving only damaged skin or abandoned gear as evidence that they occurred. Plastic has become another symbol of humanity's expanding influence, yet understanding its effects on sperm whales requires the same careful approach applied throughout this documentary. Dramatic images of stranded whales containing large quantities of plastic debris rightly attract public attention because they reveal the devastating consequences pollution can have for individual animals. In several well-documented cases, sperm whales have been found with stomachs filled with fishing nets, plastic bags, ropes, and other manufactured waste. Such material may block digestion, reduce food intake, or contribute to starvation. These cases are real and deeply concerning. At the same time, scientists caution against assuming that every stranded whale represents the experience of every population worldwide. Plastic exposure varies enormously between regions, depending on ocean currents, coastal development, and local waste management. Recognizing regional variation does not diminish the seriousness of the problem. It simply reflects the evidence more accurately and helps conservation efforts focus where risks are greatest. Some threats remain almost entirely invisible. Industrial chemicals released into the environment can accumulate through marine food webs over many years. Deepwater predators, occupying high trophic levels, may gradually concentrate certain pollutants in their tissues because every prey animal already carries a small burden acquired from the organisms it consumed. This process, known as biomagnification, affects numerous marine predators, including whales. The long lifespan of sperm whales means they may accumulate contaminants over decades. Exactly how these substances influence reproduction, immune function, and long-term health continues to be investigated, but researchers recognize chemical pollution as another pressure acting alongside many others, rather than in isolation. Occasionally, environmental disasters expose these risks dramatically. Following the Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010, scientists studying the Gulf of Mexico documented significant impacts on marine ecosystems, including concerns regarding sperm whales inhabiting that region. The Gulf population is relatively small and genetically distinctive, reminding us that global abundance can hide local vulnerability. Saying that sperm whales occur in oceans around the world provides little comfort if one regional population suffers major losses. Conservation, therefore, operates at multiple scales simultaneously. A species may appear widespread while particular communities remain highly vulnerable because they occupy limited habitats or possess unique cultural traditions not shared elsewhere. Climate change adds another layer of uncertainty, extending far beyond surface temperatures. Warming oceans alter circulation patterns, productivity, and the distribution of countless marine organisms. Deepwater ecosystems, once considered relatively stable, are beginning to experience changes in oxygen concentration, food availability, and species composition. Because sperm whales depend upon prey living hundreds or even thousands of meters beneath the surface, shifts occurring deep within the food web may eventually influence whale movements, reproductive success, and regional abundance. Predicting those effects remains extraordinarily difficult because the deep sea itself is still incompletely understood. Scientists are attempting to forecast changes within ecosystems they are only beginning to describe. This uncertainty also complicates marine protection. Drawing a protected area on a map may reduce certain human activities within its boundaries, but sperm whales rarely remain confined to one location. They cross national jurisdictions, international waters, and ocean basins during their lives. A female social unit may repeatedly visit the same feeding grounds, while mature males undertake migrations spanning thousands of kilometers. Protecting only the surface location where whales are commonly observed may fail to protect the deep habitats supporting the squid and fish on which they depend. Conservation, therefore, requires thinking in 3 dimensions. The whale uses the entire water column, from the surface where it breathes to the abyss where it hunts. Effective protection must recognize that connection. Population recovery reflects the same complexity. Sperm whales reproduce slowly. Females invest years in raising a single calf before producing another. Long generation times mean that even successful conservation measures may require decades before their full benefits become visible. Numbers alone also fail to capture the whole story. Earlier chapters revealed that sperm whales inherit more than genes. They inherit vocal traditions, movement patterns, and socially learned behaviors. If an entire social unit disappears, something else may vanish with it. Unique acoustic repertoires, migration knowledge, and cultural identities transmitted across generations. Conserving the species therefore means conserving living societies rather than simply preserving individual animals. Perhaps this is the greatest lesson sperm whales offer us. For centuries, we measured them in barrels of oil, tons of blubber, or commercial value. Later, we counted them as population estimates and conservation statistics. Those measurements remain important, but they are incomplete. Behind every number stands an individual whose life unfolds within families, cultures, and ecosystems extending far beyond human observation. Protecting such a species is difficult precisely because we are still discovering what it means to be a sperm whale. Every year reveals new questions. Every expedition uncovers another layer of complexity. And so, after following this whale through darkness, across oceans, through family, history, and the changing world surrounding it, we return to where the story quietly began. A giant resting almost motionless at the surface, drawing a series of calm breaths before disappearing once more beneath the sea, carrying with it a life that remains far stranger, richer, and more extraordinary than we ever imagined. The whale is breathing exactly as it was when we first encountered it. The sea is calm. A soft column of mist rises from the blowhole, drifting sideways in the wind before disappearing into the air. The immense body barely moves, except for the slow expansion and contraction that accompanies each breath. From a distance, it appears almost peaceful, almost idle, as though this giant has paused to rest beneath an empty sky. If someone had watched only this moment 200 years ago, they might have seen little more than an unusually large whale floating quietly on the surface. Even today, after countless documentaries and decades of research, it remains surprisingly easy to underestimate what is happening. We have become so accustomed to seeing whales breathe at the surface that we unconsciously treat this as their natural state. Yet everything we have learned tells a different story. The surface is not where a sperm whale truly lives. It is where it recovers. It is where it exchanges gases, prepares its muscles, restores oxygen, and resets its body before returning to the place that has shaped nearly every remarkable feature we have explored. Its real world lies beneath. That changes the meaning of every breath. Each inhalation lasts only a few seconds, but during those seconds the whale replenishes oxygen that will sustain nearly an hour beneath the sea. The blood becomes loaded with oxygen. The muscles store it within extraordinary concentrations of myoglobin. Carbon dioxide accumulated during the previous dive is released into the atmosphere. To us, the whale appears inactive. Inside its body, an intricate physiological reset is unfolding with astonishing efficiency. It has performed this sequence thousands upon thousands of times throughout its life. Every successful hunt, every migration, every calf raised, every encounter with another whale has depended on this brief pause between two invisible journeys. Even the shape of the whale looks different now. At the beginning of this story, that enormous square head seemed awkward, almost disproportionate, as though evolution had produced an animal carrying far more weight than it needed. For centuries, humans struggled to explain it. Some believed it was little more than a container for valuable oil. Others imagined it served as a battering ram. There were even theories suggesting it functioned primarily as a buoyancy device. Those ideas reflected the limited evidence available at the time. Today, although research continues, the head is understood in an entirely different light. It is not an accident of anatomy. It is the centerpiece of one of the most advanced biological acoustic systems on Earth. Hidden inside are structures capable of generating powerful echolocation clicks, directing sound through the surrounding tissues and allowing echoes returning from complete darkness to be interpreted with extraordinary precision. The very feature that once drove an entire global industry now reveals something far more valuable. It represents millions of years of evolutionary engineering devoted to solving one of nature's most difficult problems: how to hunt in a place where sight becomes almost useless. The clicks themselves have also changed meaning. Early in this journey, they may have sounded repetitive or mechanical, little more than underwater pulses echoing through the sea. We now know those sounds belong to entirely different worlds depending on when they are produced. During a hunt, they become an acoustic beam probing the darkness ahead, continuously updating the whale's perception of distance, movement, and shape. During social encounters, they transform into rhythmic coders, exchanged among relatives that have known one another for decades. Those patterns are not random noise. They carry identity. They reflect shared traditions. They reveal that sperm whales inherit cultures as well as genes, passing vocal habits across generations in ways that continue challenging our understanding of animal societies. We still cannot translate those exchanges into human language, and perhaps we never will. Yet translation is not required to appreciate complexity. Communication can be sophisticated without resembling speech. In fact, one of the recurring lessons throughout this documentary has been that the sperm whale becomes most interesting precisely when we stop asking how similar it is to us and begin asking what kind of intelligence its own world demands. The scars covering its body tell a different story than they once did as well. At first glance, they invite dramatic conclusions. Circular marks seem to promise battles against monsters hidden in the abyss. Long, parallel scratches suggest violent conflict. It is tempting to explain every injury through a single spectacular narrative. But the whale's skin has become something far richer than a collection of mysteries waiting for one simple answer. It is a living archive. Some scars almost certainly came from encounters with squid defending themselves in the darkness. Others may have resulted from interactions with rival males. Still others reflect parasites, entanglement in fishing gear, accidental collisions, or injuries impossible to reconstruct with certainty. Every healed wound represents a moment in a life unfolding far beyond direct human observation. Rather than weakening the mystery, uncertainty makes those marks more compelling. They remind us that the most important parts of the whale's existence continue whether or not anyone is watching. Even the solitary bull whale, drifting across cold northern waters, no longer appears isolated in the way we once imagined. For generations, people assumed sperm whales were fundamentally solitary creatures because large males were so often encountered alone. We now understand that solitude represents only one stage in a much larger life history. Every male begins life surrounded by mothers, aunts, sisters, and calves inside remarkably stable family groups. Only later, as adolescence gives way to adulthood, does he gradually move toward colder feeding grounds where his immense size becomes an advantage. His apparent isolation is therefore not the defining feature of the species, but one chapter within a life divided by age, sex, and geography. Somewhere far to the south, the family that shaped his earliest years may still be traveling together, exchanging familiar coders passed from one generation to the next. Perhaps no place has been transformed more completely than the deep sea itself. At the beginning, it was easy to imagine darkness as emptiness, a silent void lying beneath the illuminated ocean. Yet we now know that this darkness contains one of the largest living habitats on Earth. Billions of animals move through it every day. Squid drift through enormous vertical migrations. Lanternfish transport energy between different layers of the ocean. Strange predators hunt without sunlight. Nutrients circulate through invisible food webs connecting the abyss to the surface. Whale falls nourish entire biological communities long after death. Every deep dive by a sperm whale enters an ecosystem far older, larger, and more dynamic than human imagination once allowed. The darkness conceals abundance rather than absence. That shift in perspective also changes how intelligence itself should be measured. Humans often evaluate other animals by asking how closely they resemble us. Can they use tools? Can they recognize themselves? Can they solve puzzles designed by human researchers? These questions reveal interesting aspects of cognition, but they can also become misleading. A sperm whale evolved under conditions unlike anything humans have ever experienced. Its world is three-dimensional, almost completely dark, and governed by sound rather than vision. Success depends on navigating pressure that would crush a human diver, locating prey invisible to any eye, and maintaining social relationships across vast expanses of open ocean. Intelligence shaped by those demands will not necessarily resemble our own. It does not need to. The whale's achievements belong to the environment that produced them. Judging them solely through human expectations risks overlooking the extraordinary solutions evolution has already created. Despite everything science has uncovered, humility remains one of the most important outcomes of this story. Modern researchers attach satellite tags capable of recording dives in extraordinary detail, yet those instruments remain attached for only a tiny fraction of a whale's lifetime. Hydrophones capture thousands of clicks and codas, but they reveal only sound, not the thoughts, motivations, or experiences accompanying those signals. Drones photograph family groups from above, while underwater cameras occasionally glimpse behavior that would have been unimaginable a generation ago. Even so, the amount we directly observe is astonishingly small. A mature sperm whale may live for 70 years. It may complete tens of thousands of deep dives across multiple oceans. No scientist has followed one individual through every migration, every hunt, every social encounter, and every year of its life. Much of what matters still unfolds entirely beyond our reach. That limitation is not a failure of science. It is a reminder of the scale of the natural world. Human curiosity has carried us into orbit, across continents and to the deepest points of the ocean floor. Yet an enormous whale can still disappear beneath the waves for an hour, returning with stories no technology can fully recover. The sperm whale therefore represents something larger than a single species. It becomes a doorway into the greatest unexplored environment on our planet. More than 90% of Earth's living space exists beneath the ocean's surface, and much of that volume remains only sparsely studied. Every answer about sperm whales inevitably leads toward new questions about the ecosystem surrounding them. That may be why this animal continues capturing our imagination in ways few others do. It is not simply because it is large, although it certainly is. Nor is it because it dives deeply, communicates through complex acoustic traditions, or hunts giant squid. It is because every one of those remarkable abilities points toward a world that humans can rarely enter. The whale has become an ambassador for an ocean still filled with unanswered questions. Studying it forces us to acknowledge both the extraordinary progress science has made and the immense mysteries that remain. Now the whale begins to move. The breathing interval has ended. The muscles beneath its skin shift almost imperceptibly as it arches its back. Water streams along the ridges behind the head. Slowly, almost gracefully, the body angles downward. The enormous tail rises clear of the surface, dark against the sky for only a brief moment before it begins its descent. At the beginning of this documentary, that tail represented disappearance. It marked the point where the story seemed to end, because the whale had entered a place beyond human sight. Now it means something entirely different. We know what happens after it vanishes. Its heartbeat slows. Blood flow is redirected toward the organs that need oxygen most. Its lungs safely compress beneath increasing pressure. Sunlight fades into twilight, then into complete darkness. The first searching clicks spread through the water. Echoes return from animals hidden hundreds of meters ahead. Squid move through the blackness, unaware that they have already been detected. Somewhere beyond the whale's immediate range, distant relatives exchange familiar codas, carrying traditions older than any living individual. Far above, ships continue crossing the surface while an unseen world carries on beneath them. The dive unfolds exactly as it has for millions of years, even though almost nobody will ever witness it. The tail slips beneath the water, the ripples fade. The surface becomes still once more. But the ocean no longer feels empty.